Welcome everybody to the Lock-In. It's Friday night. Thanks for joining again for our weekly get-together, raising of a glass together, toasting each other's health, and sipping on some nice Irish whiskies together and hearing from some interesting people in the world of whiskey, the world of spirits, and from Ireland and the United States. We've got a double whammy tonight. Really excited for tonight. It's going to be a bit of crack. Looking forward to talking to our two guests tonight. We'll be starting off in about 5 or 6 minutes. We'll be going live to Achill Island off Ireland's west coast to Sean McKay at Achill Island Distillery, home of IrishAmerican Whiskey. And Sean's going to give us a tour, a virtual tour of the distillery, which is great because I've never been to Achill. I've never been to the distillery, and I just got a sneak peek of it there before we went live. So I'm looking forward to the tour, joining the tour with you all. And then we'll have John Beaudette joining us after the tour is over. And once once Sean has said goodbye to us and gone to bed because it's going to be late in Ireland, John's going to talk to us about everything related to the three-tier system, importing of spirits, how whiskey finds its way from Ireland to the United States and into your glass eventually. We'll talk about some of the challenges facing whiskey brands at the moment and other brands, of course, spirit brands, and the impacts of COVID and logistics challenges around the country. But we'll take all the questions that you have about Irish American whiskey, about Achill Island, and about three-tier system and everything associated with it. So it's going to be a good discussion tonight. So wherever you are, whatever's in your glass, let us know what you're drinking. Steve Smathers is joining us from Colorado Springs. Good man. He's got some Irishman Founders Reserve. Great stuff. Tommy Smith is joining us. Great stuff, Tommy. What's in your glass? Are you drinking something? JJ has got a Jameson Black Barrel. Second vaccine yesterday. Good man, JJ. Hopefully you're not feeling too many of those effects now the day after, but the Black Barrel will certainly help you. Kit Charles in the room. Hi, Kit. You're very welcome. Mark Ashley joining us with some Bushmills, 10, 16, and Sexton in Daytona Beach, Florida. More Floridians in the room. We've got Greg Anderson in Jacksonville with Egan Centenary. Great stuff. Martin Kennedy, co-founder of Bua Irish Whiskey in the house. Evening, Barry, little Method of Madness single grain, some Black Barrel, some Bua, and a big bowl of potatoes. There's an Irish spread now, Martin. Huh? I hope you'll need about 3 hours to digest all that before you go to bed. Fair play to you. Paul is joining us with the Whistler Calvados cask. Great stuff. And Jeff Adams, coincidentally, just picked up the Irish American expressions last week in St. Louis. So good man, fair play. Dave is joining us in Murrieta, California. Good man, Dave. Got Blake's of the Hollow. Dave with an unusual whiskey, a rare whiskey in these parts. And Steve says, you're showing off. You are, Dave. You're showing off with your great drops. You're a great man for the great drops of whiskey. And Ed Stannard has got his Dublin Liberties Copper Alley 10-year-old in Brantford, Connecticut. Fantastic. Keep pouring yourselves Irish whiskies over the course of the night. We're going to be introduced to two whiskies this evening that we've never had on the Lock-In before. Let's get the camera to focus on those and make sure they're facing the right way. Here we go. We've got the Irish American Classic Blend, and we've got the Irish American Single Malt 10-year-old. So we'll be sipping on both of these and talking about where they're available and what the plans are for the brand and for the distillery as well in the over the course of the next hour or so. I want to thank you all for your support over the last week as we raised money, essential funds for cancer research. I was blown away by last week's pub quiz that we hosted and the amount of money that was raised. So we set a goal, I thought ambitiously, before last week's pub quiz that we would hopefully raise maybe $5,000. That was our goal, of which 100% would go directly to fund cancer research. But of course, you all knocked it out of the park because not only did you raise $5,000, you blew past that. We are now up to $7,975, which is incredible. All of this is going to fund cancer research, high risk, high reward cancer research, thanks to some amazing donations, including from our guest tonight, John, very generous with a donation to help us get closer to our new goal, which is $10,000. So we're going to raise $10,000 between now. We're going to raise the balance here to get us to $10,000 by August when I ride 100 miles through on my bicycle through the hills of Ohio, raising essential funds for cancer research. So thank you all for your support. We had a great night. It was an amazing lock-in. Great winners for our quiz, and thanks to our sponsors on the night who gave us amazing prizes: Belfast Whiskey Week, Irish Malts, Folsom Wine and Spirits. Thanks to everyone who donated, whether you donated $1, $5, $500, every single cent counts, and every single cent goes directly, with no administration costs taken out of it at all, goes directly to fund the important research work being done by the scientists and the doctors and the surgeons, primarily at the James Cancer Research Hospital, the James Cancer Hospital, and the Solov Research Institute in Columbus, Ohio. So you should give yourself, give all of yourselves a pat on the back for that amount of money raised. We're not done raising money. I have lots of ideas for events that we're going to host over the coming weeks and months as well to raise even more funds for cancer research. And I think it's a great way for us to bring our community together around a cause that is so sadly so connected to so many families. And hopefully we can do our bit to end the scourge of cancer. Great to see we had many whiskey brands reached out to us after our lock-in, after seeing our success, offering up bottles for auction and for as prizes. So we're going to figure out ways to do all of that legally and make sure we're abiding by all of the rules about what we can and can't do with alcohol. So we'll have more details on that over the coming weeks and months. If you are working with a whiskey brand and you want to get involved with us, reach out to me. I'd love to find ways that we can simultaneously and jointly support your brand, help get more people to understand what it is you do, maybe taste your whiskey, and at the same time raise some money for cancer research. So thank you to all of you for that. Let me have a look at the comments. Bridget McCabe, our mutual friend, John and I's friend, is joining us from New York with her Irish-American 10-year-old. And she told me earlier she's going to have a bag of peanuts as well to go with the whiskey. So hopefully you're enjoying your whiskey and the peanuts, Bridget. All right. Mike says he bought the Irish-American 10-year-old at Shannon Duty Free in June 2019 and having some of that tonight. Great stuff. Great to see it being cracked open. Steve says my connection for him isn't great. I know you've had some challenges in the past with some of my sound or my connection. Hopefully that improves for you, Steve. If anyone else has any challenges seeing me, let me know. We can see what we can do about it. John Fleming, good man, John. Owner and operator of Carry Out off license in Killarney. He's on his Killoan Distillery 5-year-old small batch. Good man. Fair play. All right, so you're all welcome, and I'm delighted that you're joining me. We're going to have some fun tonight. We're going to learn. We're going to get a virtual tour. In about 2 minutes, we'll bring on Sean McKay live from Achill. But before we do that, I want to read you a little piece as I was researching Achill and people's impressions of the island and what is there to do and see there. I came across this fantastic article, and this visitor to Achill was just spellbound by this incredible island. And I want to read out what they said before we bring on Sean. So let me pull this up here. As our car rounded the bend in Mulranny, the town just preceding Achill Island, it was hard not to stare. Cascading Auburn hills fell away into placid waters, while the winding road continued on through the mountains to Achill Sound. So this is what everyone had been talking about. Within minutes of crossing the causeway onto the island, we realized the scenery would far exceed any expectations we'd had beforehand. And that's coming from someone who's lived on Ireland's wild Atlantic way part of their life. In a word, Achill Island is magical. Maybe it's the hills heavy with megaliths, ruins and heather-filled fields, the smell of the rain as it lands on wool, or the sheep that rule the roads. Maybe it's the swell and surge of the ocean that only those perched on the edge of the Atlantic truly know. Maybe it's seeing the last shards of sunlight turn the whole sky tangerine before it slips below Europe's most westerly fringes. Whatever it is, it had us hooked from the moment we arrived. And if you're considering visiting Achill Island, all I can say is you won't be disappointed. Sean McKay, those are mighty words for Achill Island.
Jesus, it's hard to follow up from that now.
You'd swear that you built the place yourself with an introduction like that.
Exactly, yeah. Jesus, you couldn't get better. You couldn't ask for better than that now, Barry. Bless you. You may have to send that to me afterwards. I might have to put that on our website somewhere. Jesus,
we frame that and put it on the wall or something. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Jesus, it's giving me the chills as I heard it.
You could almost set that to music, couldn't you? Maybe some pipers, some bagpipes on the island.
Yeah, we get John McNamara to play a bit of a tune to it, and we'll have you talking over it. It'll be great.
Well, Sean, listen, thanks a million for joining. You're coming to us late at night. It's midnight in Ireland. You're on maybe one of the most westerly points of Europe as we speak, and you've stayed up late pounding coffee to be able to give us a bit of a chat and a bit of a tour tonight. And we appreciate it.
Well, the coffee's all gone now. It's time to switch to whiskey now. It's nearly tomorrow now at this stage, so.
Just tomorrow, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Sean, you are the man now who is, I think, responsible and running and the face of Achill Island Distillery and Irish-American Whiskies. And I'm excited to learn how it all started and where you're going and to learn a bit about what you're doing there. I'm curious, did you grow up in Achill or are you from the mainland?
Well, I'm from the mainland, yeah. So we our family's from about 40 minutes away in Ballyhonus. So we can't claim the privilege of being Achill Islanders. We're blow-ins, as a man had said, you know. I also can't claim the credit of being the main man here. So as myself and my brother have run the company, and we've two great distillers here in Ken Quinn and Michael Gallagher, who have been just instrumental in the whiskey making process here in the distillery over the last 2 years.
Let's set the scene. We introduced with this wonderful prose about Achill, and
Yes.
we're going to get into some of the whiskey. But for our American audience who might not be familiar with Achill, where it is, what it's all about, here it is. I put a very detailed and very fancy map, as you can see, very scientific map here on the screen, showing Achill there off the west coast, of the West Mayo coast. What is so special about Achill? Obviously, it has it's a magical effect on its visitors. But what is Achill all about, really? Help us understand the place.
Well, there's a number of things, really, Barry. First of all is the fact that we're on an island. So we're surrounded by water, and we're also getting that pure, unadulterated sea mist and Atlantic salt sea air. So that has a great influence actually on our aging program for our casks. And as you know, like the air and the interaction between the wood and the whiskey and the spirit and the angel share has a huge influence on the characteristic of the whiskey. Another thing is, one of our key ingredients is also water, barley, and yeast. The water here that we have is sourced from Loch Corrymore here, just out past Ken Bay, and it's one of the highest mountain lakes in Europe. So it's actually filtered down through a large layer of different sandstone, but most importantly amethyst crystal, which is one of the main sand sediments or stone sediments here in this region. And it gives a lovely purified water. So much so that when one of our master distillers actually went and got our water samples tasted, so it would have been David Hines, who would have been instrumental in setting up Cooley Distillery. He designed our whole distillery here, and he actually sent away the first sample of water. And when it came back from the lab, he sent it to a second lab because he didn't believe that the results could be that good. So it's great to get that affirmation from the master distiller, and both different tests, the water purity and also the maturation climate here in Achill is just ideal for aging whiskey.
So for a long time, we've learned about and we've been aware of the different regions in Scotland and the different microclimates and the effects that different areas have and the styles of whiskey that come out of those areas. And for a long time, Ireland really didn't have distilling taking place in different parts of Ireland for us to understand whether the microclimates in different areas affected the whiskey, the finished product. And now we're starting to learn little bits of that through new make spirit and some whiskies that are popping up from the small little regional distilleries. So is that a bit of a bet or a hope that you have that there'd be almost like a DNA based on the ingredients and the water and the climate that's coming from Achill with the whiskey?
Well, it was a bit of a bet at the start, Barry, but we're about 2 years into the process now. So between our new make and stuff that's 2 years old in the barrel and different styles, so we specialise in making single malt and pot still whiskey here. So we have sent it out to different industry experts such as Jack O'Shea and different people like that, and they've tasted the whiskey and they've said that, like you said, we have our own unique DNA and there's a signature flavour to our whiskey, and there's obviously he likes the whiskey, so the new
It's good
mixture.
enough.
So that's just good enough for me. So
It's good enough.
we have a bit of a system here where every morning when we go to cut the spirit, all four of us here will get together, myself, my brother, and the two distillers, Mick and Ken. We'll taste the whiskey and we'll taste the spirit coming off the still, and we'll take a wee sip and we go, is that good enough? What is that out of 10? If it doesn't make the grade of 7 out of 10, we'll rerun it and purify it again. But it's good to know that the stuff that we made 2 years ago that we all thought was good enough to go in the barrel, we're getting the affirmation now from industry experts that it is actually high quality spirit.
Very good, very good. The distillery, I'm showing a picture of the distillery here on the screen, and I'm curious to know, how did this mad idea to spend money and time and resources on a thing that would be years before it would return you your investment, where did this idea come from? How did it come about, and how did you get to this point?
Well, it was years in the making now, to be honest. Because it would have all been the brainchild of my late father, John McKay, who set up the Irish-American brand from the very beginning. And he had this idea for the brand years and years ago. That's that there up on screen. So he had this idea, and his background was actually in construction for years. And actually, when the housing crisis and the crash came, he actually used it as an opportunity to go, do you know what? This is something that I've been working on for years in my mind. Let's put it down on paper. Let's make something of it. And the Irish-American brand is something that he always felt strongly about. And he decided to go ahead and make it. So first of all, he wanted to create something with a bit of authenticity. And I'm sure, as a lot of your listeners and viewers have seen in the United States over the last number of years, if you see something that's Irish, it's green beer and a shamrock, and it's on St. Patrick's Day, and that's the end of it. Do you know what I mean? It's what you call paddywhackery. Do you know what I mean? It's diddly, a little bit too much of the diddly eye, and St. Patrick and the snakes. Do you know, that kind of way? So he wanted to create something that was a bit more authentic. So he came up with the idea Irish American, as in there's always been a strong connection between Ireland and the USA, and it has always been the case that Irish history hasn't had a great run. If you look at the history of Ireland throughout the years, and probably the bleakest part in Irish history would have been during the famine times, when nearly half our population was wiped out due to the potato blight, and most of a good lot of that population would have had to immigrate. And during that time, they would have had a choice, especially here in the west of Ireland, to stay and starve or to get on a boat and leave. Now, sounds like quite an easy choice in today's terms, but the ships at the time were actually called coffin ships, and you had about an 80% chance of dying on that trip to the US or Canada. And that's why we use the symbol of the sailing boat, which is actually, if you can see here on our bottle, we get it on the camera. So if you see here, so
yep.
The bottle there, the sailing ship is actually inspired by a famous ship called the Jeannie Johnson. And the Jeannie Johnson actually made 16 voyages during that 8-year period of the famine, and she never lost a single life. And that was all down to the ship's captain, James Artage. He just provided basic sanitary conditions on board the ship for that 3-week voyage. It was only 3 weeks, but it was a really shining light in an otherwise bleak period in Irish history. And that's kind of what the Irish American brand is all about. It's about the story of starting off from a small place and then blossoming and growing, the same way that the Irish have done throughout history. We're a small nation, but it's not like we ever say we take over the world. we go out to different countries, bring our culture, and people enjoy it. And people enjoy our whiskey, our Guinness, our music, our stories. And that's what we're trying to impart with our Irish American brand.
Should we sip on a bit of the Irish American and talk about it?
I think that's always a good idea. Yeah.
No harm. And we're here to drink whiskey
and have a chat.
We'll be thirsty otherwise.
Exactly.
So I'm opening the Irish American blend. This is a mini bottle. Sean's got the big one.
That bottle is small, but this bottle is far away, as I say.
I'll always appreciate a good Father Ted reference.
Isn't that it?
Now, Sean, you handed me these mini bottles in person, I think 3 years ago, and I think it might have been your first ever time at Whiskey Live in Dublin. And you threw, maybe it was 3 years ago, and you just got a handful of minis and you just horsed them into my bag. You said, "Take these."
Yeah.
And I
said, "Take them."
Take them.
Well, you were one of the first guys that I'd actually talked to at Whiskey Live that actually sounded like he knew what he was talking about, to be honest with you.
I doubt that. That wasn't me at all.
I know. I had a lot of guys by the end of the night telling me different things, and you should be doing this and you should be doing that. I think Barry, you and maybe one or two other guys that actually came up to me and had an interest in our brand. So we'd always, myself, I think Paul, my cousin Paul, would have been there with me at the time. We always respond very positively to people who buy into the brand, and there'll always be the odd, for want of a better word, connoisseur who will tell you, "Do you know what you should do? Something like this." And that's
the people who haven't put their money into it are the first ones to tell you what to do with your money.
Exactly. Yeah.
So obviously you've only started distilling. Is it 2 years ago you started distilling, or
2 years ago we started distilling? So 3 years ago we actually started construction, and that's where my father's construction background really came into the fore.
I see.
Because most people take 3 or 4 years to build a distillery, and not just his construction background, his unbelievable drive. He built a distillery within about I'd say 8 months, and then it took another 4 or 5 months to commission the stills, and he still wasn't happy with that turnaround. He was like, "This should be done. Should be done now."
It's no joke. It'd take longer to build a 1-bedroom apartment over here in America.
Oh yeah, no. So it was, so 2018 we broke ground, and by October of 2019 we were distilling our first batch. So it was about an 18-month process from start to finish. But as you said, we
obviously while you're waiting for that to mature, you went out and you said, "We're going to build the brand. We're going to get our feet under us, tell the story." And you went out and you looked for some whiskies that you could be happy with, kind of representing your story and your vision.
Dad always had great foresight. There was people talking about building distilleries and making gin and vodka at the time, but his belief was always firmly focus on one thing and do it right. So in the interim, he wanted to build the brand, so to have the need for the distillery. So his idea was, if you can't build the brand and have the need for the distillery, so the amount that we're going to produce in a distillery to supply your brand, you're at nothing really. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what we did was we started out, as I say, we started out as whiskey bonders. We sourced our whiskey from a number of different distilleries around the country, and we blended them together to create a lovely, unique blend. Is what we're tasting here today. This is our Irish American Classic Blend. It's about 70% malted barley and 30% whole grain wheat. So it's a nice young blend, in the sense that it's a 4-year-old malt and a 7-year-old whole grain wheat. So the young malt gives a little bit of sweetness to it, and we used wheat grain there in that, because we just wanted to balance out the sweet. If we used a corn, it would have maybe overpowered in sweetness. And there's about 2% of our 10-year-old malt in that blend as well. So it just gives it a nice finish at the end. So it's a little bit floral. Yeah, a little bit floral on the nose. Yeah.
So the wheat is an unusual addition to a blend in Ireland, isn't it?
Yeah, well, from my time working in the States, we'd found that I think is it the Pappy Van Winkle? They're very popular with the wheat. So we said, Jesus, they're all going. They're spending thousands for that. So maybe we might. They might be doing something. Yeah, you know. So they might be doing something right, you know. But no, we just found with the wheat that with the young malt, the way it was distilled, so it's double distilled, so you get a little bit more flavour from it. And with the higher age grain, it just mellows it out lovely.
Lovely soft nose to it, little kind of very soft little spices, little hint of vanilla. Is it ex-bourbon casks then you're using, Sean, for maturation, or are you using
casks? Exactly what we do for both our blends and our 10-year. It's Irish whiskey aged in American oak casks, so first fill bourbon. So it's born in Ireland and aged in American oak.
Well, sláinte. Let's have a little sip. Sláinte. Thanks for joining us. Oh yeah, that's very different, isn't it? There's a texture to that now. There's a kind of it's not a thin whiskey. There's a good mouthfeel to it. There's a kind of a creaminess to it.
Lovely creaminess to it, nice viscosity. And again, I like to think that's the high malt content mixed with the malt grain. A little bit of floralness to it as well. A wee trick I like to show your listeners here is if you want to just put your hand over the top of the glass there, and if you shake it all up, and that'll excite all the molecules in the whiskey. And if you nose it now, the aromas just come rushing out of the glass to you.
They do. And my hand is thankful for the drink.
Exactly.
And so you said it's 70% malt or 60% malt?
70% malt and
70% malt.
30% whole grain weight, yeah.
Very good. It's very flavorful. I hadn't, believe it or not, I had yet to taste it. I was waiting until tonight. It'll be opened in person, despite how many of those.
What did you do with all the other bottles we give you?
I'll tell you where they are. They're in Columbus, Ohio, in my whiskey locker. I have a whiskey locker there from when we were living there, and that's where I took the two of these out of because I was back there a few weeks ago, and I said I have to get some of the Irish American. I went in. I practically have a box of Irish American whiskey over there. Like I should be a distributor for you in Ohio. I have so many of these minis in there.
Geez, well, I know it's hard to get one in Ohio, so yeah, if you want a job, Barry, you know, I'll be happy to take you on.
If you're wondering where all your marketing dollars went, it's all these minis you gave to me. They're sitting in a box in Ohio. There's a lovely, lovely floral note that emerges now after we've shaken it up. Mm-hmm. It's almost like there's kind of like a primrose meeting vanilla meeting a little bit of honeycomb coming through. Now you're not adding color to it, are you?
As you can see yourself,
it is as light as the day is long.
It's a 4-year. It's a 4-year-old whiskey, like so.
Yeah, very good.
It's very light.
I noticed on the website when you talk about the ship, the Jeannie Johnson, it's always pointing west. It's always heading
pointing west
to America,
and then you always read Irish American east back to Ireland.
I see. You've it all tied in. You've it all figured out. So Irish whiskey, American casks, and then the ship that went back and forth between them all. They rebuilt the Jeannie Johnson, didn't they? Yeah,
there's funny enough, the same ship, the Jeannie Johnson, actually sank in the mid-Atlantic 3 years after the famine emergency, and but she stayed afloat long enough for the sailors to actually climb the masts and be rescued by a passing vessel. So she maintained always her record of never losing a single soul on a transatlantic voyage. And they did actually rebuild it. I think somewhere down in Kerry they rebuilt the ship, and it's now sitting up in the Liffey in Dublin.
I remember called into Cork because obviously Cove and Cork, where I'm from, would have been the ports where most Americans would have or most Irish would have left from to head off west. So the Jeannie Johnson, I remember it making a kind of a ceremonial and a much lauded and celebrated return, a kind of a recreation of those journeys a few years back. Lots of questions, Sean, about availability of these whiskies. So as we're sipping on them here and we're talking about them, and the poor craters around the country that haven't got this bottle yet and they're wondering, where can we get it? where are you distributed, or what states are you stocked currently?
So states we're stocked currently where we have distributors and wholesalers would be the likes of California, obviously New York, Massachusetts, upstate New York as well, New Jersey, Missouri, Florida, Georgia. Where else are we? Actually, you can get us in Ohio as well. But I find the best way for your viewers would probably go to our website and work with our online broker who sells to about 40 states in the US. And if they would like to pick up a bottle and they use the code ACHILL, ACHILL, that'll give them free shipping to 40 states in the US. So
I'm on mute. They probably prefer the free shipping as well as the free shipping.
Free shipping. You know, you have
Brilliant.
to pay for the bottle, I'm afraid. You don't get the sipping for free.
And I know that Larry Maswoka, our friend, has also stocked it in California. For those of you who are in California, he's got a few bottles of it as well available for us. Upstate New York, Lisa says she's happy with that. Stacey's got extra room in her house if Sean wants to do a US delivery tour. Look at the kindness coming out of this audience. They're just falling over themselves to take hold of whiskey. Do these minis find their way stateside at all, Sean?
Actually, no, you're one of the few in the US that actually has some of them miniature bottles, Barry. So I'll have to restock you with a couple of them as a keepsake. You know, we only ever sold them here in Ireland. Basically, just because it was when we did them at the time, there was no one that did miniature bottling.
Yep.
In Ireland, so we had to send them actually to the UK, and then there was duty issues, and there was back and forth, and we nearly ended up paying for the duty twice to get them back into the country. So it turned out to be a very expensive marketing ploy, but no, the miniatures are lovely, but they just weren't a cost effective tool at the time.
Before we go on a little tour, so I want to put up on the screen some pictures here before you take us around the distillery. Let me see. So are you sitting, is this where you're sitting at the moment? Is it the barley field? Is this the pub in the distillery?
I'm within the barley field, Barry. Yep, that's where I am.
No better place to be than in a barley field.
Sure, look.
So this is the tasting room. So they'll do their tour. They'll sit down. They'll have a whiskey, and you'll talk the ear off them until they leave with a few bottles. Is it?
Well, exactly. Well, we can't ask them to leave with a few bottles, because we actually don't have the full license for selling here yet. So that again, that's a wee COVID thing that we're just waiting for the licenses to come through.
Very good.
So like, it is a bit of a pain now when we have tours coming through, and they're saying, "Oh, just want to buy it." Like we even have people that even in between tours coming in going, "Can I buy a bottle from the distillery?" And we're like, "I know. Sorry, you have to go down to the local supermarket here and buy it." You can still buy it on the island, but you can't buy it from the distillery. You know.
All the old rules, all the old antiquated rules. I know we'll talk to John later about alcohol laws and how all the restrictions we have today are rooted in age-old prohibition era laws in many cases. I know we'll talk about that later on, but it never fails to make it harder for us to get hold of the old drop of whiskey, the drop of the crater.
And isn't that it? Yeah.
What's happening in this picture, Sean? Is this when the stills were officially commissioned?
So that was 2019 when the stills were commissioned. So we had a bit of a party here in the distillery. As you're looking at it there, to the left, on the left-hand side of the picture, that's all the siblings there. That's me and my brother Michael and my two sisters, Kelly and Katie. And then to the right in the red coat, that's my mother Marion. And just behind her there with the glasses on, that's my father John. And in front of him with the scissors is Michael Ring, who is he was the TD for transport in Ireland at the time, and then we have the head of Udros there at the background on the left behind him.
Very good, very good. A big day.
It was
Big day for the distillery.
And of course, the green and red ribbons there for Mayo, because we're proud Mayo people.
Oh, the green and red of Mayo. You have to give us a few bars of that before we finish, will you? The green and red of Mayo.
I don't know. I don't know what I say. I wait long enough for the sing-song at the end now. There, Barry.
We can always do a midpoint sing-song. Like, there's nothing stopping us. Just let you know. Mike said he sampled both your whiskies at Shannon, and he was wondering, as he had a lovely lady provided the samples. Sean, was she one of your sisters? And then
that's
there's already
Katie
a response.
There. That's Katie there. Yeah, that's
well done, Katie.
And that's my other sister Kelly replying on the social media. So it's a family affair there now.
It is a family affair. Fair play to you. That's brilliant. Lucky there's enough of you to go around. That there's one in Shannon and there's one on the internet and there's one doing the tour.
Actually, yeah, it's definitely needed. It's definitely needed.
Very good. Very good. So everything is within easy walking distance in the distillery. So from where you are. Yep. So I believe you're going to show us a little bit about what goes on, and we'll talk about what you're making then when you come back and what you're going to do in the future. But we always love to see a bit of gleaming copper. It's not a good lock-in without a bit of copper pot staring at us. So I'll let you take us on a little bit of the tour, will I?
Right. So we'll actually do it a wee bit backwards. So we'll start off in the barley field bar, and then we'll work our way back to the stills.
Grand. I'll put you up full screen here, but I've not gone anywhere. I'll be in the background here, but I'll put you up full screen so people get to see it and see the tour.
So as you walk in here, this is our bar.
Lovely.
That's the setup we have there now. And the wee mint, just the flowers there that you see on the bar, that's actually for our end of tour cocktails. We have something called the Mayo Mojito. And the mint is actually grown here locally on Achill, so I literally just pick it up off the hedgerows, and it's fantastic, and I don't have to pay for mint. So this is actually an interesting piece here. I'll turn the light on. This was actually of the era of the Jeannie Johnson. So these are the lamp lights. One of the local hoteliers here, his father had a interest in sailing boats and that, and this piece is actually over 120 years old. So the guys that actually did our stills and did a lot of our fitting here restored that to the condition it's in now. So wow. we actually researched the company there on the brass plaque, and they're a Dublin-based company, and they went out of business about 110 years ago. So it was a lovely wee touch and a donation from one of the local hotels here.
Very nice.
So we'll bring you out here and we'll show you the start of the tour. So this is our reception area here, and as you can see, we have our 1938 Chevy pickup, pride of place, as everyone comes in. So on just here behind us here, we have it parked outside Ashford Castle, and out in the far picture there, that's our truck there just outside Times Square.
Very good.
As you can see, we managed to time it that we got a lovely ad outside Times Square as well. So
good timing,
yeah.
No fear of the Mayo lads.
No. Actually, I think I'm in that picture somewhere, actually stopping the traffic, so that we could actually get the that's my father driving the truck. I was never allowed to drive that now, because that was his baby. I think he prayed at that more than the rest of us.
Only the Irish would try and stop traffic in Times Square for a picture of a whiskey truck.
Oh, we did it. So this is the outside of the barley field bar here now.
Very good.
No, and we'll bring you to what you really want to see. And
there's accommodation on the island too, isn't there, Sean? If people want to stay there while they're sipping on a bit of whiskey.
Oh, there's a few places to stay. The Achill Island Hotel, and there's numerous different Airbnbs around the place as well. So your Airbnbs and your holiday accommodation is probably the best ways to go if you're looking for it.
Okay.
Hotel-wise, I think the Achill Island Hotel is probably one of the better ones that's actually on the island.
Very good. There we have the gleaming copper pots.
Yeah, so these are, as you can see again, the Mayo colours up at the top, the green and red. And we have our two stills here. So this is Kelly and Katie. So my father wanted to name the two stills after the two girls. So they're front of house. And our wash still here is called Kelly, and the spirit still here behind me is Katie, because Katie's the youngest of the two and she takes all day to get ready. And as you know, the wash still always runs off a wee bit quicker. So
Perfect.
there's our copper stills.
So you mentioned, Sean, that you're going to make a combination of single malts and single pot still. So double distillation, single malt, double distilled, pot still. Are you making both of those styles at the moment, or do you do one style a certain time of the year, or how does that work?
So we'll do. We'll bring it a bit closer here. This is the spirit staff here, just to give you. Can you see that there now?
Yep.
So this is where we cut our spirit, and this is our section for our wash still here in the spirit safe. So we do, we actually do double and triple distillation.
Okay.
So very often what we'll do is, as we were talking about the taste test earlier, we'll always have a figure of how much double and triple we will do. So for the single malt, personally, we do like the double distillation because that's the style that we started out with.
Okay.
So it'll be again a coolly influenced whiskey in the bottles that you have there now.
Right.
So that's the style we want to kind of keep with, and also having the plan designed by David Hines obviously has that characteristic going through it as well, you know. But we do single pot still and single malt, so we'll do triple and double of both. So we'll have the benefit of having the maybe extra bit of flavour from the double distillation, and then the triple distillation will just give us a lighter spirit off the back of that as well. So if we feel that we have enough spirit, enough flavour from the double distillation, we'll let it run through into the barrels. And if we want just to lighten it up a wee bit, we'll actually bring it down to triple distillation.
Okay. And then that all goes into ex-bourbon barrels. That's what you're using 100%, is it?
We use, I would say, 10% in what we'd like to call exotic casks.
Okay.
So we have red wine Bordeaux casks. We have rum barrels, we have port casks, and we have a nice selection of sherry as well.
A question from Peter in Dublin, wondering what percentage ABV alcohol would the new make spirit then be as it comes off that second still?
The second still, when it comes off at the start for your double distillation, you're looking at about 75% on average. And then when it's triple distilled, you're looking closer to 78.
Okay, and you're cutting that down then with the local water.
We are indeed, yeah. So the average when it goes into the cask filling vat, it'll average again on your double distillation about 69%, and then closer to 72% when you have the triple distillation.
Okay, and are all the casks then stored on the island as well, or are they transported elsewhere?
Yeah, no, they're all stored here on the island. So if you go back to the image of the outside of the distillery, so where we are now is actually on the section that has the Irish American logo on it, and
up here now. There we go.
So if you see there where Irish American is,
yeah,
that's the distillery. That's the part of the building that we're actually in now.
Okay.
And to the right of that, where it says Achill Island Distillery, that's the warehouse full of whiskey.
Full of whiskey.
So full of whiskey. So that stores 1,500 barrels, and we have it full. And well, you can't see it now, but because it's dark. But we have a second warehouse there that will store another 3,000 barrels, and we've already started filling that up now as well.
What an amazing location for a maturation warehouse. What a view the barrels have as they sleep soundly there. I mean, this is the stuff of postcards, isn't it?
Oh, it's fantastic. Like we couldn't have asked for better.
In terms of employment, then you mentioned yourself and your brother, and obviously the sisters. It's a family business. Are there locals involved in the operation then as well?
Yeah. So Ken Quinn would be, well, he'd be a dub at heart, I suppose, but he's been living on the island for the last 10 years. He actually would have been involved in the brewery here. So this was originally a brewery before we took over.
Okay.
So we were able to repurpose some of the equipment to that end. So as you know, the first half of the distillation process is fairly similar to brewing. So we were able to use some of the equipment and the tanks for our distillery.
Brendan Carty, founder of Killowen Distillery in County Down, saying it's brilliant to see how much whiskey's on site. Well done. Great community too in the world of Irish whiskey, isn't there? Have you had a chance to meet some of these the others from the world of Irish whiskey?
I haven't had a chance to meet Brendan yet. I know he's doing some great stuff with his introduction of oats into the pot still realm. We've been following that closely as well. I know a few other guys, like the guys, we work closely with the guys down in West Cork very well. Okay. And also more locally to us here, we have Lochmass Distillery. They're making some great gin and vodkas at the moment. And they're also, I believe they're laying down some stock for whiskey maturation as well. So yep. They're here in the Clew Bay area as well. So they're doing some great stuff.
Brendan said he's going to come down to you. No need to go to him. He'll come to you.
Lovely stuff, Brendan. You're welcome anytime.
Will you give him a good discount? Give him a good rate on the tour?
I'll give him, I don't know, 10% discount or something like that.
10%. Some man. Why don't we sip on the... should we move on to the 10-year-old? Should we take it out?
Well, indeed.
Sip this one. So, Irish-American, 10-year-old, Jeannie Johnson, ship there, facing west again. So, obviously, again, you've gone out and you found the whiskies that you wanted to bottle before your own matures. This is a single malt, so you sourced this all from one single distillery gave you this?
Indeed, yeah.
A little bit darker, is it? Small, tiny bit darker there, right?
Small bit darker. Well, you see it in the bigger bottle. So this is the blend, and then the 10-year beside it in the larger bottles. Yeah. So there's a fair difference in the color from the maturation, and again that's 6 years of a difference. So you can see the difference that the bourbon barrels is actually having on that.
Very good. So what should we know about this single malt? Double distilled or triple distilled, Sean?
This is double distilled whiskey. Single malt, fully matured in bourbon casks, and then actually just to give it that extra wee bit of colour, we've finished it for about 6 months in sherry butts. Okay. So you can see the difference between the colour of the two. It's a bit more richer. So as you taste it, I find it's a little bit lighter up front on your first sip, and then the flavour just kind of explodes on your mouth. So you get a lovely, almost like Christmas cake characteristic to it.
Lovely tropical pineapple notes, that older single malt note.
Exactly. And what I particularly love about the malt here is the finish on it. For a double distilled whiskey, it actually has a lovely, long, warm finish to it.
Sláinte.
Sláinte.
All the people in the comments now trying to figure out double distillation. Where does double distillation come from versus triple distillation? So if they've done their homework, they'll know what comes from where.
Yeah, well, no, but like that's something that is often said to me. Double distillation is Scottish and triple distillation is Irish. That's not generally. There's enough exceptions to both rules to know that there's plenty of distilleries in Scotland that are making triple distilled.
Yep.
And historically, there's been load of distilleries in Ireland that have started out making double distilled. So I think there's evidence that Bushmills originally started off double distillation. So they would have been one of the oldest distilleries, I suppose, that would have been making whiskey for years in Ireland. So there's your example. So what I like to tell to people is it's not the distillation, it's the climate that gives the Irish whiskey the unique flavour. Because the way whiskey matures is it interacts with the wood due to the heat and the climate. And as it warms up throughout the year, the wood will actually expand and allow the whiskey to move into the wood. And then as it cools down in the wintertime, it'll contract. And this process goes on and out for years. But in Ireland here, we generally don't have a huge temperature range from winter to summer. Especially here in Achill, it's a little bit milder here, warmer here in the wintertime and colder here in the summer. Whereas, especially in the Highlands in Scotland, you'll have quite severe winters and generally mild summers. So in the wintertime, then you have in Scotland, I suppose, in particular, you have a long period of time where there's no interaction with the wood. So it's the constant ebb and flow of the spirit with the wood that gives Irish whiskey its particular sweetness and smoothness.
There's a lovely sweetness up front, and somewhere between white and black pepper for me of a kind of a spice on the front, and then it lives on as a kind of a very crumbly malt, like you've taken the grain, the barley, the dried barley, you've rubbed it in your hands. Just to me, there's that malty crumbliness that kind of lives on.
Yeah, that's what we like to say about the 10-year-old. It's a little bit of a shy whiskey up front. It kind of gives you a little bit of spice, the little bit of sherry influence kind of hits you up front. And then the characteristics of the whiskey actually start to develop as it moves through your palate.
Enjoying it. Yeah, I like it. When you laid down your first whiskey, did you already have a plan in mind for when you'd eventually release it, or did you decide, well, it'll tell us when it's ready to be released?
Yeah, we decided that it'll tell us when it'll be ready to be released. We kind of earmarked if we were going to come out with a single malt release purely, or maybe a blend of single malt and pot still. We were looking at the 5-year mark, just because we feel that the malt takes that on its own, it takes that little bit more to mellow out. Having said that, we tasted stock there that was 18 months old, and it was just phenomenal. You could have put it in a bottle and sold it as whiskey tomorrow, Really? So we have enough stocks from different distilleries that we can blend together to keep the Irish American brand going with different age statements and different styles. Until we start producing our own spirit from the distillery here.
Will your own spirit maintain the Irish American brand name, or will it have a different name?
We'll do both. So we'll use our own stock to maintain the Irish American brand, and we will release an Achill Island Distillery brand also.
Oh, very good. Very good. You dropped a little nugget there that many people might have glossed over, but you talked about the idea of releasing a blend of single pot still and single malt. Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah, so that's something that that's we might keep in store just for the Achill Island brand, as a unique island whiskey. So again, we're working with that, and we're kind of tasting them as they develop. So that's just something that we'll keep in our back pocket until it's actually perfect, So anything we've done up until this point has been very much quality specific. So we haven't been too focused on mass production. For example, our 10-year-old is done in small batches. I believe you have actually one of our first batches there in your miniature, and in the large bottles we only did about 1,600 of those.
Okay.
No, we did 1,608. I know specifically because I hand corked every one of them, and that was because when it came to bottling day, 3 of my cousins lined up, and sure, of course, it was a Monday. And didn't I give them a few bottles of whiskey before we started, and then they never showed up on Monday. And I actually hand corked every 16 bottles. So we only had 3 lads on the bottling plant instead of 6. So I had to do every single cork on the very first batch. So for a while there, I was kind of walking around like this with the shoulders up after hand corking all of them. But 1,608 is the exact figure on the very first batch.
It's nice to hear, well, obviously the hands-on approach that you have, because it's a family-run business. You're going to wear many hats and do many things. It is interesting to hear when a new distillery has maybe a twist on something, whether it's their local water, whether it's how they're going to blend. In this case, a couple of things I think are interesting for our audience to maybe zone in on or hone in on a little bit is, one, like your blend. The Irish American blend is malt and wheat, which is atypical compared to many blends in Ireland, which would be malt and grain, or pot still and grain, or malt grain and pot still, or malt grain and pot still as well. And the second thing is this idea that there could be a blend of pot still and single malt from the distillery. I think the only example of that we really have in the marketplace at the moment would be Writer's Tears, which would be the blend of pot still and malt. All other blends are typically using one of those expensive components and a less expensive maize component typically. So that's something interesting for us to look forward to.
Yeah, well, sure. Our working it'll always be more expensive to buy it in from somewhere else. So we're actually producing the pot still and the single malt here as well. So that's something that we'll work with in the future. And we have done a whole range of pot still whiskey. So we haven't just done 60% malt and 40% grain. We've toyed with the whole mash bill, and we've gone from 70% malt to 30% grain, all the way back the other way to 70% unmalted barley and just over 30% malted barley. So we've actually, over the whole winter, we've been producing our pot still whiskey because it's easier to make whiskey in the wintertime, because it's cooler, and it doesn't take as much time to cool down the stills and your fermenters and everything. And when you're working with pot still whiskey, it's a little bit more temperamental, so especially to the temperature. So that's the reason why a lot of startup distilleries are just focusing on single malt. But we like to push ourselves here, so we've really gone down the road of experimenting with a lot of different style variations of pot still. So we will know in 4 years' time what is really working for us. So we'll know in a year's time how that's matured, and we go, okay, so hone in on this for our blends, and this will work well for our pot stills for our a single pot still releases.
Well, with the green and red of Mayo hanging everywhere, you can't let Mayo down. Like, you'd have to.
Oh, you definitely can't.
Bit of extra pressure. Jeff Adams is wondering, and this is a question we get a lot from our American audience when it comes to Irish whiskey, about higher ABVs. He's wondering, will you be bottling your own whiskey at higher than 40% ABV, and will you be non-chill filtering? Is that anything you can answer for us?
So the whiskey in the bottle at the moment is 40% ABV. It is actually non-chill filtered. Now that's done through a clever method in the way that the whiskey isn't brought down below 0. It's just kept at about 5 degrees Celsius, so that we can filter out the compounds that will give the whiskey that kind of huey color or huey look to it once it hits room temperature, but it still leaves the flavor compounds in there. Talking about higher ABVs, we have a cask strength release coming out pretty soon. If you wanted to talk about that, that's something very
good
exciting.
Segue.
Yeah,
good segue. And right on cue, Jeff saying or Stacey's favorite, not one of our guests, Stacey, cask strength. Well, how about that? You're teed up perfectly.
Lovely. Right. So
here's an exclusive. Let's get ready, everyone.
Now, this is a complete exclusive. I was actually hoping to launch this whiskey here in Ireland, but due to shipping restrictions, we didn't get the packaging in time. But this whiskey I'm about to show you here now is our 19-year-old single malt, and it's Founder's Reserve. So it's in homage to our founder and my father, John McKay, who passed away last year. And this will be a cask strength single malt Irish whiskey, triple distilled and fully matured in rum casks. So from the Caribbean islands to Achill Island, we'll be bringing this whiskey to you.
Amazing.
Would you like to have a look at it?
No, we've no interest. We've no interest.
No, you've no interest. No.
You'll have to show it after that build up. Now we have to see this thing.
So this is
up on full screen now. Oh, look at this! Look at this.
So can you see this here?
Yeah.
So this is just the presentation box that'll come in.
Oh, beautiful. So and your dad's signature on the bottom there.
Well, actually, do you know what, Barry? It's actually not his signature, because when he designed this label, actually 3 or 4 years ago, he wanted to do a Founder's Reserve, and it's the design that we never actually got to, because we purchased this whiskey many years ago, and it was always something that he wanted to have done as the Founder's Reserve. But when the marketing company went and put his signature on it, he goes, "Just don't be putting my signature on that. You know, anyone could put that on a check and copy it." So he made them change it to a generic John McKay logo, and he goes, "Yeah, I'm happy with that." So in his wishes, we kept true to that.
Oh, so, very good.
So it comes in this lovely display box, black piano finish to it.
Beautiful.
And here's the whiskey itself.
Oh, stunning. Oh, that's a stunning presentation. Beautiful. That is beautiful.
So I actually have an American bottle here to show for your American viewers.
Look at this. So it's coming to America, like Eddie Murphy.
It is coming to America. So you can see there now. If I bring that back a little bit, you'll see the whole bottle. Side by side there.
Beautiful.
So we've done this. It's a cask strength, so 54% after 19 years. We just barely got it to 54% because, the angels share. It'll be done in fully matured in rum casks, which is extremely rare in its own. The fact that you're able to get them and to be at that quality for that length of time. You were talking about the malt tropical notes earlier with the 10-year. This is just bursting with banana, apricots. It's just a phenomenal whiskey, look, I wish I had a sample of this to send over to you, Barry. But it's just that in short supply now at the moment. Now I couldn't be sending you over much of this.
I don't want any of your excuses. But so how many bottles of this did you say are available?
So there'll be 625 bottles of this in the US and the same amount here for Europe. The reason for that number is because actually today, the 6th of the 25th of June, so 625 was actually my father's birthday, and we decided that that's the way we'll do it now. And we did it the American way, so we put the 6 first because we did feel that 256 would have been a bit too mean in bottle terms.
We're toasting your dad tonight and celebrating his vision, and it's wonderful to see it come to that this Founder's Reserve gets to be released and celebrate him and a lovely tribute to him and something that can live on, and I'm sure will be will have pride of place in many people's homes, which I'm sure is something he'd be proud of.
Yeah, so that'll be I do hope so. Well, I'm fairly certain he'd be proud of it because, again, a man with great foresight, he pretty much had the label designed as a 16-year-old whiskey. And then he went and decided to build a distillery, so we never got the chance to release it. So So we're doing that as a tribute to Dad. But we have been very careful not to alter the design too much of what he actually made. So this is actually the last stock of whiskey that Dad actually sampled and sourced himself.
Oh, okay.
So this will be something that is our 19-year-old. We're going kind of a little bit all out with the very first release of it. We do have, we will be releasing this every year for the next few years, probably hopefully until it's at least 30 years old. So this will be a series that will run for the next 10 years or so.
So you have enough stock that you're going to be able to release a batch or an evolved batch every year, a more mature version every year.
Yeah. So the rum casks now, that will be very rare. We only have a small amount of them.
Okay.
But we do have, again, a good stock of bourbon aged whiskies. So as you know, the beauty with the bourbon is we can maybe add finishes to that. That'll give it different characteristics as it matures. But it is something that we think will quickly become a collector's item, not just because of the packaging, but of the quality of the spirit.
What foresight your dad had to be seeking out aged whiskey stock a few years back, because if you were to do it today, you as you well know, you'd be paying multiples of I'm sure what you might have been able to get it for a few years ago, and there's just such little availability of aged stock like that anymore.
Well, look, it wasn't cheap when we went for it.
I'm sure that much. I'm sure.
But trying to buy it today, you just can't.
Yeah.
I know, and people have asked me for, can you source a certain amount of aged whiskies, and it can't be got. Irish whiskey, anything over 6 years old, single malt, you can't get it. It's just not in the market because of the boom of Irish whiskey.
Yep.
As you've seen yourself, there was a huge surge of young blends hit the market, and of course that hit the single malt stock as well, because you have to have a certain amount of malt whiskey in your blends. So the amount of aged stock that's on the market is zero. I'm not saying that there's not aged whiskey out there. It's just nobody's selling it. If they have it, they're holding on to it, and rightly so. And
if you find it, you might have to get it through not even just first hand, but second hand or third hand, or through third parties or fourth parties or fifth parties, and everyone's taking their little bit on the way, and it becomes very expensive. So somebody else who's in the business of sourcing great whiskies at the moment, Dahi O'Connell from WD O'Connell. He's tuning in, looking forward to watching the replay as well. He says, fair play, Sean and co. Dahi doing great things with WD O'Connell. The packaging, Jeff has a question. Will the US bottling also come in the presentation box, or is that just for the Irish market?
Here we wouldn't leave you out like that. Like, I wouldn't show you a nice box and say, "Oh, it's just you're just going to get the bottle in America." Like,
you got us very excited there, like, because you said, "Here's the American bottle."
Yeah, no. It's coming all in the exact same packaging. Yes.
It's an awful question to ask for something that's obviously so. It means so much. There's a lot of your own family history and stories and connection behind it, but. Is there a price on the whiskey, even though we hate to ask these things it seems vulgar to ask?
Well, I had a price before the whole shipping and delivery methods kind of just went out of the window this year. I'm sure John Beaudet will kind of cover that later. But initially, I want to say it'd be on the shelf for about $280.
Okay.
So that's what we'll be looking at. We tried to price it reasonably in the sense that it's a cask strength whiskey, it's a limited edition, and it's a 19-year-old single malt.
I think that's fair.
We didn't want to just come out because we had aged stock and charge a lot of money for it. Again, we're in the business of, we're realistic in the sense that we know we're not just competing with Irish whiskies. There's a lot of Scotch.
Yeah.
We won't mention much more than that, but their 19 and 20-year-old whiskies, if you go into a liquor store in the US, will be much more competitively priced than your Irish stock at the moment. So we try to absorb some of the cost of that to keep it in line with what the US consumers will actually be seeing on the shelf, and get them to choose Irish whiskey over any of the competitors.
I think that's a great price when you factor in all those elements. And like you said, the competition from the US and from further afield for people's wallets. And there are younger whiskies, as you've seen, far younger whiskies, and maybe with less interesting aspects. Maybe they're just perhaps solely bourbon cask. Maybe they're bottled at 40%, going for a lot more than that. So, you know, as soon as you said single malt, 19 years of age, my mind immediately goes to the likes of a Bushmills 21-year-old. But again, we're getting that at 40% ABV. We're not having the benefit of a cask strength. So you're giving us something that the market is crying out for, a cask strength aged Irish whiskey. There's not many of them being released. Not in the US anyway.
Like, it's a huge amount of flavour in that cask strength as well. And again, because it's cask strength, if you want to water it down to 40%, you know, you get 2 bottles out of it. So it'll be grand.
When will that hit? I know there's logistics challenges and all kinds of issues, but whether in Ireland or the US, any hopes on when you'll get it on the shelves?
Hopefully we'll have it in the US by October, and we'll have it here in Ireland for September. Okay.
I'll be picking up a bottle as soon as it comes to the US.
100%.
So you're going. So the next releases are that the 19-year-old single malt, and then every year you'll start drip feeding your fantastic aged malts into the world, while you're waiting for your own stock to be ready. What are, obviously it's been a very tough year, logistics wise, tourism wise. Are there signs of hope and things turning around? Do you think, from your perspective, looking at you have your finger on the market every day, is there hope out there at the moment?
I believe there's light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. To go back to kind of the branded image of the Jeannie Johnson, we feel like we're on that ship at the moment, and you know we're getting to our destination eventually. You know, we feel like we're on the right boat. You know, the production wise, the guys here are doing a great job. And you know, we're cranking out, especially where we're sinking malts, we're cranking out about 30 barrels a week. So the production is going great. We're making great spirit. We've a lot of interest in our whiskey and what we're doing, and our new fill from commercial aspects as well. So it's starting to feel like the cloud is lifting here in Ireland, and just from speaking to customers in the US, it feels like they're having the same reaction as well. So hopefully we'll emerge and into a brighter future.
We're all crossing our fingers and our toes, and anything we can cross to see that future. And now, you know, now that there are so many whiskey experiences, distilleries to visit, where COVID closed off all of those to tourism, lots of experiences now can open for the first time that have never been opened before, because they're new to the market, giving new experiences to our American friends as they go over as well. And I see in the comments tonight people adding Achill to their list of places to visit when they come over. So if they knock on the door, charge them double. Make sure you get all the money out of them when they come over. Don't be giving them any discounts.
I have no problem with that at all.
But Sean, this has been fascinating, and a real pleasure getting to know you and the distillery, and getting to understand the story a bit. And obviously today, a very poignant day, and we're very grateful that you've spent some of it with us. And I know that what you're doing is going to both pay off, and I'm sure give you something to be very proud of, all of you, over the coming years. So really looking forward to seeing these releases coming into the market. And will you keep us posted on everything you're doing? Send us messages and pictures and videos whenever you can.
Don't be saying things like that to me now. I'll be hounding you with stuff.
Everyone says they'll hound me with pictures. I say that to all the distilleries. I say, hound me with pictures, and then they'll do it for about a week, and then I won't hear from them for another year. But feel free to send anything.
You've never sent me that invitation now, so be careful.
Change my number.
Yeah,
my WhatsApp will be blowing up. But we have a great Facebook community that it would be lovely to have you in there if you're on Facebook. It's the Irish Whiskey Fans of America, our Facebook community. There's about 8,500 people in there. There's great camaraderie and people would love to hear from you. So, as you announce the release of the whiskey, the 19-year-old, drop into the group and let us know and let people know where they can find it. And we'll support you and boost you as well so we can clear the shelves of that whiskey.
Lovely stuff.
Well, Sean, I'll let you go to bed. It's late, and I know you're stuck in a distillery. I suppose lots of us would love to be stuck in a distillery this time of night.
You could be stuck worse places now, Barry. You could. You could.
Well, you've been very generous with your time, and it's been a real pleasure having you on. So thanks again for joining us, and I know there's lots of thanks from everybody else. And keep us up to date, and maybe we'll take a visit up there next time I'm back in Ireland. I'd love to come up and visit, take the long drive from Cork.
Do call down anytime. Sláinte, Barry.
Fair play. Thanks a million, Sean. We'll talk to you later. Sláinte. Great stuff. Brendan Carty says, great show, lads. Good night. Good night, Brendan, up there in Killowen Distillery. Cool Running says, great lock-in. We're not done yet. We're only halfway through Cool Running. We have more to come. Thanks a million to Sean McKay for and the whole family behind the scenes operating social media and answering your questions in there as well. And I see some of you are in there making purchases online as well and using the discount code. So fair play. Lisa Corton says she hopes to get over for a visit. And Stacey Stearns, lots of claps and cheers and applause. And more of the McKay family thanking us for having them on. So thank you all for your time tonight. And you can all go to bed now. You're off the hook. The job is done. All right, so let me know what's in your glass. In about 2 minutes, we're going to go to John Beaudet. John's going to help us understand how you got your whiskey in your glass, why you might not be getting certain whiskies in your glass, and the wonderful world of importing and distributing whiskies across the United States. John's a great character, and we're going to talk to him in a minute or two. Everyone is giving great praise for Sean. Steve says, thanks for your time. Stacey never knew about Irish American before, but really excited to try everything. Yep, I think you should. I've enjoyed that wheated blend. Again, I knew nothing about this, didn't even open the bottle. Sean gave me about 500,000 of these bottles 3 years ago. I hadn't opened one of them, but really enjoyable. A lovely flavor, lovely texture to it. And the 10-year-old single malt. I love an aged single malt, and double distilled single malt has a wonderful character to it. There's a lovely texture and there's a lovely pineapple, mango, tropical fruit note to it. So very enjoyable, very, very enjoyable. And they're very competitively priced as well. Michael Mullen is just in from work, running the bars there in Scotland, sitting with a black bush. You're a man in Scotland, aren't you, Michael? Remind us. Sitting there with a black bush. I have a bottle of it here. We might have to drink a bit of it ourselves now in a minute. But why don't we talk to our next guest? I'm really excited to talk to John Beaudet, so we will bring John straight in. John, welcome to the lock-in.
It's a pleasure, Barry. How are you? That was some show. Sean did a phenomenal job. I wish I had a distillery or something I could show you, but even if I had one, I don't think it could ever match what we just saw. But they're a terrific family, and as you know, we work with the brand, bringing it in as the importer. And that family, his dad, who I got to know, and his mother, Marion, are just phenomenal people. And I would say to everybody out there, you can be 100% sure it's going to be an experience drinking their products. Their dad thought a lot about it, and their children today think even more about it. So it was a real pleasure watching it, Barry.
That was a lot of fun. And great to get the tour. And in these unusual times when we can't always get to the distilleries we want to get to, the next best thing is at least being walked around by the owners of the distillery. It's a lovely treat for us to get to see the distilleries virtually.
Absolutely. And by the way, thank you, by the way, for all the work you're doing, on the cancer. You talked about it earlier today, but of course we're all impacted. There's no one in your audience that at some point isn't impacted, but you do a phenomenal job on that, and know that it's greatly appreciated by all your fans.
And thank you very much for the very kind donation.
No, please. No.
Honestly, it's going a long way, and we're very appreciative. And look, we have a great community here, and if we can use the community for good, and not just drinking whiskey, which is also good, but That's just
Right.
taking. Now we got to give,
Yeah, exactly.
We got to flip it over. So you mentioned that you wish you had a distillery to give us a tour of. Does that mean we're not going to get a tour of the house? No, you're not going to walk around the house
Well,
with the...
all you'll see a number of client bottles from Ireland as well as other places in the world, and a lot of sports memorabilia. That's about what you'll see since the pandemic. This is where I've been held up for. We employ about 125 people, about 25 minutes from here. But I'd have to say during the pandemic, most of us work from home, and so you sort of got used to working out of your basement area or whatever.
Well, that's a better basement area than I've seen in lots of Zooms and live streams I've been on, I can assure you.
Well, anyway, it's an accumulation of things over the years. It's just a reflection of how older I am, I think. That's pretty much it.
We gather and we collect as we get older.
That's right. Yeah.
John, you're the president, the CEO of Mhw Limited. I won't do justice to the breadth and the range of services you offer and things you do. Would you introduce us maybe a little bit to and give us an overview of Mhw? And you mentioned you were working with the Irish American, but our audience would love to know what it is that Mhw does.
Yeah, sure, Barry. Well, it's about around 1995. I used to work at PepsiCo, their headquarters in New York, and a lot of people may not realize, but Pepsi used to be involved in the importation of Stolichnaya, Russian vodka, as a counter-trade system with the former Soviet Union. Pepsi concentrate would go into the Soviet Union, and you'd create a demand in America for Stolichnaya vodka. It was true barter in its day, back when the ruble was worthless. And so back at that time, there were very few imported vodkas. You had Stolichnaya, basically, then Absolute came along, and Finlandia. And then effectively, Pepsi sold the rights to Stoli when the Soviet Union came apart and Perestroika came along. But what was interesting was right after that, the internet came along as well. And so I worked out a program myself, and another former Pepsi executive took over the beverage alcohol side of their business when they sold Stoli, and created a new model, a service model, to help new brands coming into America. With the advent, Barry, of the internet, we were predicting an explosion of new products. Americans want everything, and choices were limited at that point. As I said, each category had only a few products. So all of a sudden, as people got knowledgeable about products around the world, there'd be this opportunity to provide a system, what we call a turnkey operation. As you know, the American market is somewhat complicated. We might touch on that later about our history and how we screwed it up, and why we've got some of the laws and regulations. But at the end of the day, you have federal guidelines, and you have 50 states with slightly different rules and regulations. So to the extent we could create a model that sort of the plug and play, where a brand could come over here, be in control of their destiny, but utilize a back office operation that could handle compliance, administration, logistics, and all of those things. So that's how it was born. What eventually happened is that some of the larger companies saw the model and thought it could be effective for their brands as well. So today we service million case brands to a lot of startups, celebrity brands, and things like that. So over the years, we've worked with thousands of products covering wine, spirits, and beer. But Ireland has been a hotbed for great products for many, many years, as you know, and we're working with many of those folks. So that's just a little bit of the history. As I said, we've got about 125 employees here just outside of Manhattan, in a town called Manhasset on the North Shore of Long Island. And then we have other operations in California, Florida, New Jersey, where we run some wholesale operations. So we're basically, our goal is to help brands like Irish American and many others succeed in America.
So if an Irish whiskey brand is formed in Ireland, and they eventually age their whiskey, it's ready to sell around the world, you can be their one single throat to choke in the United States to help them get distributed, get onto retail shelves. Where does it stop and where does it start?
Well, we really handle all of what you just described. I mean, our clients are going to be heavily involved in decision making on what distributors. Is it going to be Southern Glacier? Is it RNDC? In our model, they can also work directly with us, and we can act as their distributor in, as I said, California, New York, Florida, New Jersey. so we can act as an incubator for them. But the uniqueness is that the brand owners, and that's what they are. They're the brand owners, and at the end of the day, they have a lot of say, and we want them to control that destiny. And so we're pointing them. There are other, we do some brand development work. We've got social media contacts. We can basically provide a wide range of services, and at the end of the day, let them make the right call for their brand, because that's what most of these folks are really building something for, potential sale down the road, creating value. And that's part of what we see at MHW. Many of the brands that we've touched will sell ultimately for big multiples to the big global players, the Diageos, Pernod Ricards, and so forth. So especially on the spirit side.
So I'd imagine that there's a large element of not knowing what there is to know when it comes to the American market, especially Irish brands dealing in Ireland. It can seem like quite a relatively easier way of doing business compared to the 50 countries that exist within the United States, really, when it comes to licensing and legislation, etc. So I'd imagine that having one person or one company that can point them in the right direction that seems to be the kind of the secret sauce to MHW.
It really is. And again, they have options when they come to America. We're one of them. If they can go out and find a more traditional type of importer, but you're not going to get one of the major players today, Barry, the big names, to take a brand. Typically, they want to own them. They're more likely to buy your brand at a big multiple down the road after it's been in the market and so forth. So yes, they can come here, and we deal with a lot of the back office compliance and the kinds of things that they don't want to deal with. They want to focus really on marketing and selling their products and getting it, to the consumer.
Yeah.
We're also well versed. I say this often. I'm in the industry 30 plus years. There are more changes happening in the last 2 or 3 or 4 years than what might have happened in 20 years before. It's that quick with social media, digital marketing, and things like that. We're starting to see a lot more what we call e-commerce and direct-to-consumer models that are out there in the marketplace that can really help a brand get to market much faster today than certainly even 3-5 years ago. You probably see that yourself when you were stuck at home and you wanted to bring, order products for delivery and things like that. Suddenly, there was a rush to that program.
I have lots of questions about from a consumer standpoint, because obviously you're working with the brands, but it's always to get things to a consumer, to make sure the consumer has what they want, where they want it, when they want it, hopefully for the price they can afford. But and I have lots of questions about that and the timings and the three-tier system. But speaking about the Irish whiskey market specifically, you have a bit of a connection to Ireland yourself. You're no stranger to the country. It's not like you're not just a New Yorker telling us in Ireland what to do.
No, I'm not. I have an affinity for Ireland. Let me just say that any experience I've had with Ireland from the time I was a child to any business trip I have, it's always exciting. And, we work closely, for example, the folks at Board Bia, when it comes to trade organizations, and we work with all of them around the world. There's nobody better than those folks. They really look out. If you're a supplier in Ireland and you're thinking about America, boy, it's an advantage to have those folks in your corner, because they can really provide some great guidance. But as you say, my mother immigrated from a little place called Shrone Rathmore, County Kerry, Ireland. She did that around 1946. She was only 15 and actually wound up finishing high school in America. She was the oldest of 8. And one by one, she brought each of the siblings came until all 8 of them came to the United States and actually the New York area. And my uncles got very involved at that time in the bar business and Irish dance clubs, the Ambassador and Red Mill. In the 60s and 70s, the Bronx was a real hot spot, Bronx, New York. And so, I saw a lot of that. They were great athletes as well. While I was a kid playing baseball, basketball in America, I was in Ireland at times as a young kid watching people like Mick O'Connell, the great Irish Gaelic football player, and my uncles, Mick Moynihan and Tim Moynihan before him. So I got a chance to see Ireland from the inside. I may have mentioned I was very young in 1969. As far as events that I can remember as a young kid, I was in Shrone when America landed on the moon. And I had a chance there was only one TV in the whole area, and there was maybe 60 people packed in one room watching it. And I was a young kid, but I remember those Irish brogues saying, "This is nothing but Hollywood. There's nobody on that moon," And I thought to myself, geez, are they right? But anyway, so things like that. 3 years later in 72, literally 3 years to the day, I was in Croke Park in Dublin as a young kid watching Muhammad Ali fight Al Blue Lewis in the middle of Croke Park. And it was an amazing event. Being a boxing fan and boxed a little in college. Yeah, seeing Ali in Ireland was something. I was even a fan as a young kid, but that's something that was memorable. You never forget. And you've had
more Irish experiences than many Irish people have had. Those, I mean, those two alone. Yeah.
Well, you got, it's funny, Barry, Ireland has a great history of athletics, as you know, sports, but boxing, you look over the years, folks like Barry McGuigan, you've had some great fighters that have done extremely well. And then of course you have Conor McGregor in the other MMA. And even your guy now, you got Tyson Fury. I think I've read anyway, his parents may have come from Ireland. He's the
That's right.
King, right? Yeah, that's right. That's what we hear. So anyway, but
there's another boxer, an Irish boxer came from my hometown. We've talked about him on the Lock-In a few times. His name was Jack Doyle. And Jack Doyle, have you ever heard of Jack Doyle? And he was famous because in the 1930s, he toured America, filling opera halls, filling Carnegie Hall as a singer as well as a boxer. And he ended up marrying Movita Castaneda, famous actress in the 1930s. And they ended up getting divorced because he was sadly too fond of the drink, and she went on to marry Marlon Brando. But he was a real hero to many in Ireland because he was this boy that did good. He got out of Ireland and made his name. He's actually he's in a movie, I think it's Mutiny on the Bounty. I think he's in this movie in the 1930s in Hollywood as well. So, yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's pretty. Yeah, no, there's some great stories. And as I said, some great athletes coming out of Ireland. Oh, same thing too, I just talking about athletics. When I went to school at Villanova University, some of the great, you talk about, and that's a track school. I wasn't a runner, but they had some of the incredible athletes coming out of Ireland. While I was there, he was a few years ahead of me. There was a kid named Eamon Coughlin. A very famous.
Very famous.
No, so he was there, and before him you had Ron Delaney and
Olympic gold medalist.
Yeah, that's right. And
Sonia O'Sullivan. Did you ever hear of Sonia O'Sullivan? She went to Villanova.
She's incredible. She might be the greatest. She could turn out to be the greatest of all of them. No relation, I think, to Marcus O'Sullivan, was another great runner.
She's from Cove as well. Same place as me.
Is that right?
Yeah. And Jack Doyle, three of us.
Yeah. Wow. You're a bunch of celebrities. I wonder what's going on in that town that's producing all of you.
Who knows? Who knows? We could spend a whole episode talking about the pros and cons of the town. I can tell you.
But if your audience, any of the sports fans, if they go on YouTube, you can pull up the Ali fight in Croke Park. The whole thing is there from 1972, and you had a guy. It's an incredible story. There was a documentary done on it, I think around 10 or 12 years ago, and won an award in Ireland. It was called When Ali Came to Ireland. And then, as you probably know, Ali's great-grandfather immigrated out of Innis, Ireland, I think in
County Clare,
County Clare, is that what it is?
Yeah, that's right.
So all of that, there's some really incredible stories. And he did an interview which was, if you like Ali, I would rate it as maybe one of the top 5 interviews that he ever did, where he came to Ireland before the fight, and he sat down with a famous guy that you had, O'Shannon, I think was the guy that interviewed him.
Cathal O'Shannon. Yeah.
That's him. That's the guy. Yeah. Cathal. Yes, I couldn't pronounce that's the Irish. Yeah, Cathal O'Shannon interviews him. It's probably one of the best interviews you'll ever see. And Ali is funny. He's at his best, but he talks a little bit about his experience in Ireland and meeting the people. And of course, there was issues with American race relations, and Ali gets into all of that. So I highly recommend that interview and watching some of that fight. But he loved Ireland, as you know, and then did a couple of trips after that. He came back for your Special Olympics at one time, and then he was back again visiting Innis for the first time. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, that's right. He did a little promotional 30-second or a 1-minute montage of the scenery around Ireland and describing it and talking about how he wanted to come back with his family once his fighting was done.
It's a really neat story, and like so many celebrities that come to Ireland, they never forget it, right?
That's right.
They're committed. But yeah, so I have a lot of great history with it. Even on my father's side, my father's mother, even though I have the French Canadian name, my grandmother immigrated from Mayo, Culchaman, but I'm mispronouncing it, Culchaman, Mayo.
Okay, yeah.
And then she left and became a nurse in Philadelphia, many, many years ago. Long story how I wind up with an Irish grandmother meeting a French Canadian. But anyway, so I'm
we have to check your backwards. We have to check your background. It's a very Irish thing. We have to know, where are your people from? It's a very important thing,
we're always more proud of our Irish side. You know that. That's the way it is in America, right?
I know.
Although we like the French too. Don't get me wrong. I got that name. Kidding.
Well, we'll leave the French for another day, and we'll talk Irish tonight.
They're great, yeah. But yeah, so again, I've spent a lot of time over there in Ireland. As I said, we work with some phenomenal brands in the whiskeys and so forth. Some of the newer ones. I mean, you take McConnell's Irish whiskey. We do Cool Swan's Irish Cream, which is the ultra premium in their world. Just it seems like everything we touch over there when it comes to America, it does very, very well. We got another one, Boatyard Irish Gin is just coming. There's just some really neat stuff coming out of Ireland, and I think as you look at the next 5 to 10 years on where a lot of these brands are going to be, I think the American market is where they want to stay focused, and for good reason. They're going to get great value here.
And obviously the largest market for Irish whiskey in the world, always has been our biggest single market. I'm going to move on to a third whiskey I'm sipping on here. Not sure if you've ever seen this. It's called Two Stacks. And this is a cask strength Irish whiskey, 65% ABV or 130 proof.
Wow.
It'll both give you a wonderful flavor and take the wallpaper off the walls for you at the same time. It's a brand doing very well in Ireland and has just launched in the US with their Dram in a Can, their Irish whiskey in a can. You might be familiar with them.
Cans are getting popular, no question about it. So that'll have to be something we go find when we get a chance. So if it's in America now, that's wonderful.
It is. There's so much to discuss and talk about with the American system and navigating it. And I'm curious, like from a consumer standpoint, there's a lot I'd imagine consumers aren't aware of, don't know at the federal level, at the state level. But at the very top of all this, there's this very simply kind of stated, but much more difficult to explain, this 3-tier system, which controls all of the alcohol that's moved around the US. John, could you simply explain the 3-tier system to us as consumers?
Yeah, just, Barry, sometimes I find it helps to give a little bit of the history. What, some of the folks,
perfect.
Some of them know this, and some may have heard bits and pieces of it. But when you go back to like the 1800s in America, when we were moving from east to west, you've probably seen the old Western movies and stuff. And there was the saloon, right? A lot of action, gunslingers in saloons. And then you had dancing girls in the saloons and all. But for decades and decades during the 1800s, those saloons were men only. And what was happening is that, the women that were in there were probably not there on dates, typical dates. It was a little different back then. But most of the women were home raising children in the Midwest and so forth. And most of the money was being used in the saloons and not much left. So there was a movement, an anti-saloon movement by women in America during the 1800s. And it got more powerful as time went on. Eventually, you started, as you moved into the early 1900s, there was a movement on, hey, alcohol is killing this country. And not as much in the bigger cities, but as you moved out west. And so I won't get into all of the sort of perfect storm. You had World War I and some other things that led to it. But suddenly there was this opportunity to create prohibition around 1919. And they were able to get that passed. That was our 18th Amendment to our Constitution. What happened was right after that, you had what we call the Roaring 20s. But when prohibition started, organized crime jumped in right away. I think it's important to understand that, because when the rules and regulations start getting written about how to handle the three-tier or creating a three-tier system, a lot of it was in response to what happened during the 1920s. And it was during that period, well, all of a sudden you had speakeasies. These are these, sort of underground clubs or bars that opened up. And take New York City, we had 32,000 illegal speakeasies operating on every corner behind the scenes. But they were some clubs. They were tablecloths, men and women. That was a big thing in America. It changed the dating approach in America. Women were welcome in speakeasies. They put tablecloths out there. It was really a game changer on the way, people enjoyed themselves. And so the problem was that it was the organized crime, because it was illegal, they were running it. And there were certain players in each of the major cities, Chicago, New York. You had people that were generating significant amounts of money and running a distribution system from beginning to end. So if you take someone like an Al Capone, who was the biggest, he was involved in production in Canada, illegal production in America. He was the distributor. He owned the speakeasies. He owned every piece. He did the deliveries. He had the wait staff. So there were no tiers. It was 0 tiers. It was basically the funds all flow through me. And then he decided who got what. And then you even had some Irish players too that were some biggies. You may have heard of a guy, Richard, they called him Pegleg Lonergan, if you remember him from your history books. He was another one. George Bugs Moran was another. And then you had each of these guys running the cities around the country. So to give you an idea, Capone averaged over a 4-year period $60 million in revenue that he himself took in. So
wow.
So now the government jumps in and we get the 21st Amendment, and the federal government steps in, and now we're going to make alcohol legal. And what they wanted to do is make sure that organized crime could never get back involved. So they created these tiers. The retailers would be separated from distributors, who would be separated from suppliers, and you couldn't move vertically through the system. And so then the 21st Amendment allowed the states, the federal government, so your label approval that you see in America is governed by the federal government, but then each state has its own ability to regulate within its borders and collect tax dollars and so forth. So that's why you have a lot of the differences state by state. They were able to modify within their borders on how they wanted to manage alcohol, but they're still governed by certain federal guidelines like label approvals. So you have slightly different tax structures and things like that. But at the end of the day, it made for a little bit of a sophisticated, challenging system. On the flip side of it, our tax structure is very favorable, the best in the world. Even with the federal and state taxes, we're much, much more, I'd say cheaper than just about any country you could name in the world. And so from that standpoint, I think there are certain advantages. But the 3-tier system can be a little bit challenging, but it has proven to be pretty effective. Our under 21 consumption is way down. They collect all the taxes here, and they do protect the public. Those are some of the critical missions, in terms of what the government's attempting to do in our world.
So I love the history of it, and I'm always fascinated by the origin stories of how things came to be. And what I've come to realize is that anything related to alcohol, the way we enjoy it today, is typically the result of legislation and laws historically that were designed to either prevent or promote the use of alcohol, but typically it was to prevent its consumption in various ways, or to streamline its availability. The 3 tiers in their simplest form then, so no one entity can own all 3 or 2 of those tiers, right? They're separate ownership structures.
Yeah, you can typically, for most states, you can be an importer and potentially a distributor within that state, but you can't be involved in the retail side if you're in the distributor or import in most states. So that's where the separation is more critical at the retail level. That's where they don't want the vertical, and when you think about it, Barry, in some ways it's important, because what they want is a level playing field. If I'm a major supplier and I also own retail, I'm going to make sure that my retail establishments are more likely to focus on selling my brands at the exclusion of others. And so there was some thought that went into a lot of that. You have some of that vertical prohibition in other parts of the world too. But yes, that is a lot of it, is that they want to make sure that all brands have an equal opportunity to sell in these various states. So in many ways, the three-tier system, while it seems complicated, it has done a very, very good job in servicing, I think, the needs today. There are times where people feel like, it's dominated by major distributors. The top 10 wholesalers control about 75% of the action. Well, that doesn't leave that much maybe for some of the others. And in spirits, they probably control more like 85 to 90%. But at the same time, there are other options to get your brands into markets. And eventually you want to graduate to one of these major wholesalers, because as I was talking about before, I haven't seen a brand sell to a major player that didn't go through one of those major wholesaler networks. I mean, eventually the big guys are important.
Right.
But we're looking, there are other, direct to consumer. There's other models out there that are forming, that are helping brands, some of the newer, smaller brands get to consumers.
And at a state level, then it can be increasingly more complex, and depending on the state. And Ed has a question here that aligns with this. Doesn't Ohio purchase the liquor and the retailers are simply selling it on consignment, or am I mistaken? So referring to the control state element, Ohio being a control state.
Yeah, Ed, you're right. Certain states in America, and again, it goes back to my point about the states having the ability back in 1933, 34, coming out of Prohibition, they were able to modify and create rules and regulations. 17 states at that time, it was actually 18 then, but Washington changed. But at that time, 18 of them decided to go control, meaning that the state effectively becomes the distributor. And so they control and earn the margins. In many cases, they're earning the margin that a distributor gets, and also the retail side as well. So yes, Ohio as well as Pennsylvania and Michigan, those are three of the bigger ones that the state is actually effectively handling the logistics and the sale of alcohol. So Ed is right. And some consumers would like, more of an open approach, like New York, California, and Florida, that are what we call more open. But those control states are doing a better job of every year, I feel, in making sure there's choice, more selection for their consumers.
Would I be right in saying that Pennsylvania and Ohio, then, I think I've heard the statistic that they are the number one and number two purchasers of alcohol globally as single entities?
Yeah, you've heard that. Pennsylvania for sure. Ohio and Michigan, I'd have to look at some of the numbers, but your point's a good one. They are literally, you're right, Barry, they're the buyer, if you will. And so they're powerful buyers, and they're often bringing containers on a direct basis and so forth. And control states, they have a reputation in the industry as, when a brand goes in, once a brand gets set up in a control state and gains distribution, boy, they stick forever. They really do. There's a tremendous loyalty to brands in control states. I'm not sure what the psychology behind all that is, but it just seems like they have more staying power on brands in some of the open states.
Does that make it difficult for Irish whiskey brands that you're working with, if they want to get into these large states, Pennsylvania's, Michigan's, Ohio's? Are they literally, to use the phrase, to steal the phrase, filling dead men's shoes? Does a brand have to leave the shelf before they can come in?
No, they're expanding. The way the control states work, unlike the more traditional open states, periodically there are certain times of the year where the control state will review the portfolio and accept submissions for what they call listings. And so that's a big deal. But typically, if you've got a great product and you can get an agent or broker to make that presentation with you or for you, there's a chance you're able to get in. Now, some states like Pennsylvania have an alternative approach. If you're not what they call formally listed, you can also do what's called a special program, where you're a specialty item. And if someone wants you can do them sort of like one-offs on an ongoing basis. We do that for a number of new brands. So that's a way you can actually access a major market through some of these specialty programs. So there are approaches, and they're recognizing, Barry, more and more that consumers with social media and digital marketing, they're getting exposed to a lot of these unique craft type of products. And I think the benefit for Ireland for craft and great whiskeys is that the same players in America want access to these consumers, and they're pushing very hard for options to get to market. And we, as MHW and others in the industry, are making sure that the benefits that any domestic distillery gets, that the foreign ones get the same, that there's not discrimination. And you may have seen that. You recall the Craft Beverage Modernization Act that reduced taxes on craft products significantly. The industry made sure that the foreign brands received and producers received that same tax benefit, which was pretty significant. So all of those things, I think, bode well for new brands. I really do. I think craft and new can do very, very well going forward for sure.
You mentioned the historic, the things that took place in the 1920s and 1930s that influenced where we are today. One of the challenges in the United States for consumers is that if they live in a state that doesn't have a brand whiskey that they would like, but they see it in a state a few states over, there may be the challenges of getting it into the state, what with the laws around crossing state lines and shipping alcohol. Those seem to be quite prohibitive in terms of expanding access and choice. Are these things that are being reconsidered, reevaluated, or are they pretty much locked in because of the wholesalers and the distributors in the States?
It's a fascinating question you raised, because it's one right now that is top of mind. What you see right now, for the last 20 years, America has made an adjustment on the wine side. They have what we call direct-to-consumer options, where wineries, for example, in California, can ship directly to consumers in most of the states. And typically, it could be up to 3 or 4 cases a year that a consumer can buy, bypassing the whole 3-tier system. So that has proved to be successful for wine. It only represents about 3% of consumption, believe it or not.
Wow.
So there is an argument, and especially coming out of the pandemic, why can't the same opportunity and option be there for craft spirits and other spirits in general that want to get, as you say, Barry, to their consumers in states where they don't have access? And so there is a movement afoot to try to get that done. We at MHW are actively involved. At the end of the day, no one wants, the 3-tier system, as I explained before, is very important, and the wholesalers do a phenomenal job. That's important. But why wouldn't there or shouldn't there be a percentage for these new players in order to gain access? Why couldn't we have a model like that? And actually, Kentucky, just recently, effective just a couple of months ago, distilleries, craft players can now ship to consumers in the state of Kentucky directly from the distillery. And now importers who would bring a product, let's say from Ireland, can now bring it in and ship directly to the consumer. So
that's amazing.
That's where the parity is, and to prevent any kind of discrimination. Now, the big question is, all right, that's Kentucky. There are movements in states like New York and California. The Distilled Spirits Council in America, the biggest trade organization for spirits, they are actively involved in pursuing this. And the hope is that some of these states will follow suit with Kentucky. There's a couple of things they need to change about Kentucky's regs on it. But at the end of the day, if this is going to be 3 to 5, 6% of the volume, the goal would be, hey, if a brand from Ireland can get to a consumer and build a little bit of a following, they'll want to graduate eventually to mainstream on and off premise, and then the distributors will pick them up then anyway, right? So that's the idea. But yes, the answer is, now, will I live long enough, to be honest, Barry, to see all these states? I don't know. And you can probably see that in my face. Your audience is like, yeah, he won't see it. But anyway, but the point is that, can it happen? The pandemic, I think, has changed things. I think things are moving at a much, faster speed. Even our state, New York, our Governor Cuomo, I think, has made some tremendous adjustments to the systems. I think even though they were temporary in nature, allowing our distilleries to ship direct to New York distilleries to ship direct to consumers within the state of New York. And
Yes.
probably heard some of the other things, cocktails to go and
Yep.
programs like that. So I think, there are changes coming, but at the end of the day, it'll take a little while to get it done. But as I said before, the speed at which things can happen now are much faster than they were for the first 50 years where we came out of Prohibition.
How long is there an average time that it would take an Irish whiskey brand, and I'm going to keep using Irish whiskey brands because of the show we're on, is there a time that it would take for them to get onto a shelf in the United States from the moment that they are interested in getting on a shelf in the United States? How long does that process take? Is there a fixed time? Does it vary?
It can be as fast as just 2 months, 3 months, believe it or not. And I'll tell you why, and that's changed. But here's a quickie. If you took an Irish product today, a traditional Irish whiskey, 3, 4, 5, whatever, you bring it over, an importer can get that label approved, within weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That quick. And then, for example, let's say you were going to try to utilize social media to help you in the beginning. There are platforms out there today. You've heard of Drizzly, Reserve
Yep.
Bar, Thirsty. These operations, they're third-party marketing, but in our case at MHW, where we're a distributor in California, New York, and Florida, New Jersey, we can take that product, get the product here in America, put it in the warehouse, and then retailers who are part of that network and they're looking for new products like that, before you know it, the brand owner is able to put a button, effectively a link from their website, buy now, and those marketing programs
Yep.
link it to the retailer that carries it, and they'll ultimately deliver it to the home in those states. So it's got to
Right.
be, but those are, the states I mentioned will cover 40 to, a high percentage of the public. So, so yeah,
Okay.
you can be in
They can be
business
quick.
relatively quickly. Yeah, no, it's a new phenomenon, how quickly a brand, and that's why you see a lot of these celebrities jumping into America, and it's for that reason. They're able to generate volume almost immediately, right? If a major, I'll give you an
Of course.
example. We work with a number of them and do some of that back office work, whether it's The Rock with Terramana Tequila, or most recently, we do Kenny Chesney, his Blue Chair Bay. These people through social media are able to generate a lot of traffic very, very quickly. So it's
It's the Conor McGregor effect too, isn't it? It's the the reason Conor McGregor is the third best-selling Irish whiskey in the world.
Look how quickly he was able to accomplish that, right? Amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, no, so
Larry has a great question, and it's one that comes up a lot. So when in Ireland, and I'm part of different organizations and groups and clubs in Ireland in the world of whiskey, and it's very easy to get whiskey from one place in Ireland to another. I just put it in an envelope and I send it, and it seems you kind of skirt the law sometimes. It's that if you don't declare what it is. But in the United States, getting bottles from collectors or enthusiasts from one state to another privately is very difficult. Is there a way will that ever change? Is that purely because the federal government has said, okay, the post office will never accept alcohol because of the wholesalers' lobbying efforts, or what prevents the easy transportation of alcohol from private seller to buyer, perhaps?
well, again, private seller commercially selling to consumers is going to be a challenge, just because there are challenges right out of the gate on it. As I said before, between direct-to-consumer programs and the ability to go to some of these third-party marketing players, that's going to help that situation. As far as crossing over state lines and everything like that, remember a lot of that comes down to the taxes as well, right? And states want to protect their interest there. So that's why the direct-to-consumer models I talked about before, the same way they operate today with wine, they track the tax dollars. Today with electronic, monitoring, you're able to really follow everything that's going on, and so you can protect the 21, on delivery and so forth, having them sign. You can get your taxes collected and all that. What we really need is to model the way the wine business is operating on that D2C, and it'll help some of these problems. I don't want to sit here and tell you that we don't have those challenges. They do remain. Right. There are some states where, short of somebody shipping it to them, improperly, it's hard for them to get it. So we don't have all those answers at this time.
In the non-selling world, and I know you're focused on helping brands obviously connect with consumers and make the sale eventually, but there is a social media that has allowed the movement of, or allowed brands to get to market quicker, has also given rise to collectors, communities. There's Irish whiskey communities that like to trade samples with one another. That's difficult to do, isn't it? It's hard to get samples between one person and another.
It is. It really is. If they're doing it, outside of the traditional commercial programs, then I wouldn't be that well versed in any of that, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is not easy to do. And remember, it's alcohol, and where alcohol moves and who gets their hands on it, that's part of the challenge, right? There's an initiative right now to get the U.S. Postal Service involved in moving alcohol, wine and spirits, and obviously they could use the revenue.
No doubt.
So you'll start to see that, and then I would venture to say that in time, as we see, look, right now you have alcohol potentially competing with cannabis in America, right? And now you have the movement of cannabis, and certainly, you have to ask yourself, well, what procedures or guardrails need to be put in place for cannabis, and do they track like alcohol, or maybe can they be loosened up in some ways? At the end of the day, the final mile delivery, which is so critical to make sure that under 21 is protected there, and as I said, taxes and just in general protecting the public, those are always going to be the critical elements of how alcohol gets distributed in America. And again, a lot of it still goes back to what we did and how we botched it up, maybe pre-prohibition. So
right.
I would expect us to err on the side in many cases of conservatism. And again, for your collectors and people that, are looking to try and taste, I don't know how quickly that would change.
Sure. No, I appreciate that insight as well. I want to talk about something that you've had a bit of a front row seat to, and that is the challenges, the logistical challenges that exist in the world right now. And I have an example here. So this is a bottle of Redbreast Lustau edition. For our Ohio viewers who are joining us, they'll know that they cannot get this for love nor money in Ohio. It is sold out. Redbreast sales have increased 30% over the past 18 months in Ohio, which is fantastic. But it also means that the shelves have been depleted. And it's not as easy, and there's been astonishment at the fact that if a shelf empties, that it can't be immediately replenished. You have some insights and some knowledge as to why that might be the case, John, don't you?
Well, we do, Barry. What's happened? We're in a very unique time in the history. Never in my 30 plus years have I seen anything quite like it. But coming out through the pandemic, we had a couple of things real quick that happened in America. Under the Trump administration, they slapped some tariffs on actually it was aluminum and steel in 2018. All of a sudden, the EU turns around. Why alcohol gets dragged into this stuff? I don't know. That's politics, and also the fact that I guess every American can relate to it, so they drag us in. So before you know it, Trump says, "Okay, I think the fact that we don't produce enough steel and aluminum, that's a security risk. I'm going to, prevent more from coming from import side." So then the EU turns around and they grab us on American whiskey and bourbon, and they put a 25% tariff. Now, later, separate and apart, all of a sudden, we get involved in, there was a dispute going on for 25 years with the World Trade Organization, Boeing versus Airbus. We're trying to compete in the EU, and Airbus I guess the EU gave subsidies to Airbus that prevented our Boeing people from competing. So the WTO said, okay, you guys win, America. You're entitled to $7.5 billion annually in tariffs if you want to go hit them on something. Why we suddenly choose to do alcohol, and suddenly we put 25%, tariffs on Irish single malts, Scotch single malts. We put it on even Irish creams, German liqueurs, and a bunch of wines. I won't get into the details. All of a sudden, everybody in America, the major companies, want to fill up. They're trying to anticipate, well, is the tariff going to hit? Is it going to be my category or whatever? And now we've got the whole ocean full of containers bringing product over here. They're now stocked up in warehouses. It eliminates space, all kinds of logistical challenges. Then you also have the global shortage of containers, right, that you keep reading about. And then we have Amazon doing their thing in the northeast of America, taking over a lot of the warehouse space, trucking and all that stuff. All of these things are converging at the same time. And so what it really leads to is that bottle that you have there is more likely to take 2 times the timing to get from point A to B than it would have before. And along the way, it's going to run into some bumps in the road potentially. And things as simple as, oh, if it's in my warehouse, the distributor's truck should be able to go pick it up and bring it to me in a week. Well, no, that's not what's happening today. It could be many, many weeks. And then the distributors turn around and the retailers say, well, I want to stock up on product. So then they try to do that. Now, if trucks are loaded with, let's say the top 10 moving items, what about the next 10? Do they get on a truck because they're loaded up with the others? So then you get a little bit of that challenge as well. So it's really, as I said, sort of the perfect storm. And I'm not sure when we'll be out of it, but I would hope within the next 6 months to a year, things will start to calm down a little bit, and maybe we'll see more semblance of order the way we used to see it. But it's going to be a rocky road for a lot of brands for a bit.
That's great insight and great for us to know and understand, because I think maybe in our minds and our worlds where we think we should have everything when we want it immediately, we often don't realize what has to take place behind the scenes in order for it to get to us, in order for it to be available to us. So there are global issues at play that are affecting it. And like you said, many different things converging at the same time. All of this at the same time, John, as consumption of many different spirit categories has gone through the roof and is growing over the past year for good or bad. Can you talk to that? Is that purely COVID related? Is it again a mixture of social media? Why are people drinking more spirits?
Well, we were running on just spirits prior to COVID. We were up around 2% each year prior to entering COVID. We finished last year, spirits in America are up on volume almost 6%. And just to give your audience a general idea, we're at about 260 million 9-liter cases in consumption of spirits. It's pretty big. So suddenly you go from growing at 1.5 to 2 to 6% coming out of the pandemic. Clearly, and that's with losing a lot of the on-premise activity. What has happened is that the off-premise consumption, home consumption, is more than offsetting in a big way. And so, yeah, Barry, I think there's a social issue here too. We have to look at. I think people are consuming more alcohol. Many of them that were consuming at home have changed their consumption habits a little bit, and now how that changes as on-premise starts to open up. It's just that initially, I can tell you this: for the first 3 months, the overall consumption is still well ahead of where it was against 2019, including, as we're opening up, off-premise is still way up. So the consumption rates are climbing and continuing to do that. So we'll have to see, what happens. And then certain brands, of course, the more well-known brands are feeling a lot of that benefit. But now you're starting to see, as consumers can maneuver and move around now, you'll see a lot more action in the new product area as well. We're seeing it at MHW. But I think we're going to have to look back 2 or 3 years from now, Barry, to really answer your question. What happened socially and the consumer habits and so forth. And when they found out that they could get it so easily delivered to the home from their local retailers or online, the Drizzlies of the world, when you put all this together, it's ease of access, choice, and things like that are seem to have been made much easier. I just wonder, though, I feel like as we open up the on-premise and people go back to enjoying consumption in a responsible way on-premise, I think it'll have an effect on the off-premise and home consumption, and I think that'll drop off in time. That's my own opinion, but we'll see.
Sure.
I could be. It's a logical.
I'd be interested to see that. It's we've a phrase in Ireland regarding alcohol. We say some people drink to remember and some people drink to forget. And
Right.
there's always the danger that as consumption goes up, it's because people are trying to perhaps not remember the challenges perhaps in their lives and the things that they're facing, and perhaps the society and that maybe isn't working for them, or their life isn't going the way they want to. And so there's always those dangers, isn't there, that this increase in consumption is going up because of some of those disparities and challenges.
Yeah, no, Barry, that's a tremendous point. Clearly, and a lot of your audience, like myself, with 4 children that all went through the process of before 21, over 21, and all that, and we worry about that in America all the time, and driving and drunk driving, all those things. But our industry has done a phenomenal job on that, on building awareness, educating our youth, and so I'm very optimistic from a social responsibility standpoint of where things are going here in America. And I know when I travel in Ireland, I'll tell you, I know how strict the rules and regulations are around that driving and so forth. And it's remarkable. They've taken it to another level for sure, and done a remarkable job. But in America, the numbers are all heading in the right direction from a responsibility and protecting those folks. So, but you're right. I think, we just came out of a pandemic. There's always something. Who knows what the next thing we deal with is? I know. But the one other thing is that in America, the winning products, it seems to be the movement towards premiumization. One thing that caught me by surprise, I would have thought, America going into the pandemic had been moving it with the premium sides leading the charge, right? Premium and ultra premium in products. And the theory being, well, consumers are drinking a little less, but drinking much better. That was sort of the way it was moving. And then all of a sudden we see the pandemic, and you would think people would move to a more, maybe cheaper. Not at all. They were, when they were consuming at home, they wanted to consume, top of the line and things like that. So, and then, in America too, Barry, today we have about 240 million consumers that are 21 and older. And we add about 3 million new 21s every year. When you think about that, and that's why so many of them are looking and doing research on new products and what's coming and so forth. And your show is a great indicator of that. I mean, you're educating consumers about the world of Irish whiskey and so forth. And so I laugh because I tell people, the consumer today, whatever you tell them about your brand, you better be right, because they're going to check on it. And when when Sean was showing that distillery, I thought, boy, he's doing himself a lot of justice there, because the people can look in and see that, and one day, as you said, maybe travel and experience it live, but they know it's there.
John, you are a keen student, clearly, of history and history related to alcohol and the alcohol industry, and how it's affected the shaping of laws and availability and the emergence of brands. I'm curious, you've been involved in this world for 30 plus years. In that time, Irish whiskey has changed dramatically. And we know of the doldrums of the 1940s and 50s, and that lost century, really, from the late 1800s to the late 1900s, where Irish whiskey was just on a continuous decline. And I'm always fascinated to understand why things change in either direction. And we've seen double-digit growth for Irish whiskey almost every year over the past 10 years or 20 years now at this stage. There are two things that stand out to me as reasons for that. One is Pernod Ricard pumped hundreds of millions of dollars into the promotion and marketing of Jameson, which opened up markets to Irish whiskey that were never opened before. And the second is there has been for the past, let's say, certainly the last 8 or 10 years, with the arrival of new distilleries and new brands, there is now more availability of Irish whiskey than there has been perhaps in the past 60 or 70 years. What do you credit with the growth in Irish whiskey over the past 10 or 20 years?
Well, I it's funny. The history probably better than I. When you look back on Irish whiskey, at one time it dominated America, right? For sure, and certainly pre-prohibition it did. And then there were changes after that. It was interesting. Joe Kennedy, John Kennedy's dad, he played a factor in this because, there was that whole, remember that theory that he was a bootlegger, Joe Kennedy, and that's how the Kennedys made their money. And as you may know, probably the reality was that Joe Kennedy had basically a head start. He sort of knew when Prohibition would be ending, and he had actually FDR's son, who was president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's son, go over to Ireland, cuts a deal with Dewar's and Gordon's Gin, and he brings it to America and he holds it right outside. So Dewar's Scotch was the first to come in a very big way. That gave Scotch a little bit of an advantage in New York and some of the major cities right out of Prohibition. But fast forward, so Kennedy wasn't involved in illegal trade of alcohol. But I really believe that, the resurgence, which, yes, you can attribute to Jameson, they've done, I think, justice and to Irish whiskey, because it is introducing the category to a lot of 21s, right, to 35s. You see it now. Again, I go back to you, educating people. Some of them are going to start on Jamesons, but clearly they're going to graduate very, very quickly. And each year, as we get into more social media, digital marketing, and education, that movement from Jameson to the others is going to happen at a much faster pace than it had before. So where the category in America today is at 5 million cases and growing, I think what you're seeing, and I know a lot of that Proper 12 is a big part of the growth that we're seeing now. But, the other brands, the higher ends, the more, let's say, premium and ultra premium, like you see in bourbon today and American whiskey, you're seeing it Irish whiskey. Now, what that growth is, Barry, whether we can continue Irish whiskey growing at close to double digits, I don't know. But I think what you'll see is the premium side will grow at double digits plus. The Jamesons and the Proper 12s, they may pull back a little on their growth, just again because of the way that consumers today will jump around. The people that drink those are not going to be as loyal as the ones that are drinking the more premium and ultra premium. But I'm super optimistic about. I'd be crazy not to say anything other than Irish whiskeys are going to continue to be star brands going forward in America. There's no question about that. I mean, and you can see the excitement. The other thing I tell people, 10% of us in America, and that's over 30 million, are actually Irish American. It's an incredible number, 30 million Irish Americans, between here and between where I am and California, which is amazing. And a lot of them, the new ones coming up, are getting more educated about their own history. And when they get into their history, they find out about whiskey is a big part of the culture and history of Ireland. And I think that is going to add to the potential volume down the road. And then these stories like Sean was talking about just the history of his family and how that distillery got built. There's a lot of those great stories out there. And what they say in America, we all want to be Irish. But the fact that you're starting with 30 million that are, bloodlines, and then all the rest that want to be. So I think things bode well for the future.
What is it they say? There are two types of people in the world, those who are Irish and those who want to be.
Exactly, yeah.
If only there was an Irish-American whiskey. If only there was an Irish-American whiskey for these Irish Americans,
Exactly, a great name for it. But even the other, Ireland is doing, as I mentioned, the creams, like the Cool Swans, but the gins. There's a lot of new cool things coming out of Ireland that I think are also going to be big winners in terms of brands and building, value for some of these players that are looking to do that today. There's a lot of investment going on, as you know. Some of it is American money that's being invested in brands over in Ireland, building distilleries and things like that. Yeah. We run into a lot of that. But I think that's pretty neat what's going on. And it just seems like when you look at, I was looking at numbers recently about how many craft, I think you've got over 40 now in Ireland that are producing whiskey, right? Versus 3 that you had maybe 10 years ago or whatever it was. It's a dramatic increase. I think that tells you something. And then when you look at who are the people that are investing in Ireland, you've got the global players, as well as a lot of other, venture capital funds and things like that. They're not putting money into Ireland for any other reason other than they know nothing's a sure bet, but it's a great bet.
Yeah. You touched on this, or you mentioned it a couple of times during the evening, and that is Proper 12 and Conor McGregor and celebrity brands. And that's a very new phenomenon for Ireland, because Ireland would typically we would not be very proud of celebrity endorsements, and we wouldn't look to celebrity the same way the United States might. But clearly, Conor McGregor has hit on something where he can leverage a global audience, a social media platform, and sell a whiskey. Now, we don't know if he ever liked whiskey before he ever came up with this idea with his partners, but it seems less important that there is a whiskey provenance or a story with the whiskey, and it seems more important that there is a brand aligned story, whether this is the fighter, the underdog, going to beat, as he called them, the Jameson brothers. But do you think we will see more of this flocking towards a brand and all of the extensions that go with the brand than we have in the past?
I do, and simply, Barry, because so far, until proven differently, we've worked with a lot of them. I mentioned, I'll tell you one that caused a lot of the excitement, as recent as a few years ago, George Clooney with Casamigos and the tequila, right? So he goes out, it looks authentic. He goes to Mexico, there's pictures of it, and he actually is actively involved in it. And then he sells it for over $1 billion to Diageo a few years later, right? So we were doing the service work for him, and we watched that happen. And yeah, other celebrities looked at the same thing and said, well, yeah, why can't I do that? And so, again, you go back to social media, and they have all these followers, Instagram, Twitter, all of that. And yeah, they can get consumers. Now, I'll tell you, there are certain celebrity brands that we've worked with. I mentioned The Rock. He's killing it with his. Most recently, we're doing work for Kendall Jenner, one of the Kardashian. She's launched a new product, and that'll do very, very well. There's a bunch of others. And again, we're just a service provider behind the scenes on it. But it does seem as though they can move the needle so quickly, but it has to be authentic. Now, your guy there coming out of Ireland, McGregor, he had an incredible following to begin with. But he also, to his credit, I mean, when you read and look, the guy seems to be consuming and enjoying it and talking about it and so forth. I can tell you, I won't say it here, but we've worked with a number of celebrity brands that didn't make it. And these are big name people, but a lot of it had to do with their connection to the brand and would the consumers really buy into it? Did they really believe that they were really committed? Are they just a name? Do they have skin in the game? Those kinds of things all matter, but I don't think you'll see a shortage. They're going to continue to come for a while. It doesn't mean a brand needs to have a celebrity, because we have other brands that are doing quite well without celebrities involved. But it won't happen overnight as quickly as it will. You'll see it happen with these celebrities. It is remarkable how quickly they can send out information and consumers say, hey, how do I get a bottle immediately?
Yeah.
Really the reach. Now, whether after they consume it, you're a whiskey expert. I'll leave it up to you to say, to tell people whether Proper 12 matches up to what it's claimed to be and all that. But I know this, that, if his audience is 21 to 30 and they're drinking it as shots, maybe it's not as critical as the guy that's launching, right?
I think so. I think that, look, I'm not going to wade into the taste qualities of compared to the celebrity side of it, because it's been, boy, you should see the conversations on it in our group. It gets very heated, but it's very tough, I think, for people to separate the celebrity from the whiskey sometimes. But I do think that their endorsed brand, or the brand that they've built, I think what he's doing with his whiskey for the audience that get him and like him and buy into his brand, it is exactly brand aligned and appropriate, and is doing very well accordingly. And I think we can get quite snobby, I think, in the whiskey world too, because we think that everybody consumes whiskey in snifters beside fires with wolfhounds at their feet. And I know some of our audience have wolfhounds. No offense to the wolfhounds, but rather that let's be honest, most Irish whiskey in the world is consumed in shot format in about a half a second, and we shouldn't ignore that fact. So while we sit here waxing lyrical about 19-year-old rums, we must realize they are the tiniest part of the market currently.
Well, again, I mean, it's a phenomenal success story, what he's done, McGregor. I saw him in Vegas. I saw the following years ago that he had, I saw all the people from Ireland coming over on flights to Las Vegas to his fights and all. And over time, he built up such an amazing audience. And then, of course, it caught the Irish American community pretty heavily. And so, you know, and then, of course, he sold, you know, Proximo, the group that's involved with that. They obviously felt pretty darn good about the future to lay out the money they did for it. So, right. But yeah, there's different ways. There's different types of products. I mean, in America today, you know, if you look at the sneaker business, I'll just pick one industry. You know, it's celebrity driven. The players that wear those sneakers and speak to their audience can sell sneakers tomorrow at numbers you wouldn't have dreamt of 10, 15 years ago. So, right. But at the end of the day, the sneaker better work because the consumers, you know, they'll buy them once, but then if they're inferior, they won't. So,
I know. A couple of questions come in here, and I want to be conscious of your time too, John. I don't want to burden you too much with your time. But Larry has a great question. Like, how do you distribute bottles in short supply in a fair manner where demand vastly exceeds supply? And some states might have more of a demand than others. How is that allocation handled or decided upon? Do you know?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. Basically, allocated items. If you start out, if let's say using an example, allocated limited supply of an Irish whiskey makes its way into the United States. There are 50 states. The importer of that product will have to look at their distributor network in the 50 states and start thinking about, well, what's going to be a fair allocation, right? So certain states, depending on their size and so forth, are going to see their fair share potentially. Now it goes to distributors, the next tier we talked about within that state. That distributor has a customer base on and off-premise accounts. They're going to look at those accounts and they're going to look at it and say, okay, how am I fairly going to allocate? I don't want to upset my customer base. And it works its way right through the tiers down to, you know, effectively the retailer, and then they deal with their own consumers. Certain states like New York, if a distributor has a certain amount of product, they can't basically discriminate with retailers. It has to be a fair process. So I won't get into the details, but there are systems in place that basically go back to what I said before. We try to provide a level playing field to the extent possible. So if something's on allocation, then you have to make sure that it's spread at least fairly reasonably, that there was some thought in how the retailers get it. Then from the retail to the consumer, that's another allocation process that they deal with to keep their consumers happy. I'm a big believer in get your order in early. If you think it's coming, go to your retailer and say, I understand this may be coming. I'm a good customer. Can you please put me on a list or something along those lines? I mean, that's the way.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Good advice. And somebody's always going to be upset, aren't they? With limited supply.
Oh, you can't. And we were saying before, Barry, when you talked about, you know, the supply issues and getting cases and it's retailers trying, I just say in general, order a second one now across the board. When in doubt, just order an extra one or two and until the smoke clears and we get back to more normal logistics.
What would our forefathers have thought of these races to the doors of liquor stores to buy bottles of whiskey? When you think of how whiskey was just probably a way to get through the day 50 or 60 years ago.
Yeah, but you know, culturally, there's something about it, and I think, you know, I know Ireland takes a lot of credit in the history of whiskey, right? They and for good reason. But you know, it is something that is common. If you go back in the history of Ireland and those that have of us that have of Irish descent, quality whiskey, the same way, you know, we attribute quality stout coming out of Ireland. I'm more of a beer drinker than I am of anything else. And I appreciate beer and stout coming out of Ireland. But so much of that history is there and a lot went into making it and how it was made back then. And so I think today, as we learn more about that history, we appreciate it even more, what the people before us did to produce these kinds of things and how do you replicate that and enjoy it today. So it's an amazing science, the whole history of whiskey and Ireland and America. And I know Ireland, we're funny here. Ireland has choices. You know, we sit here in America and think, oh, whatever they make in Ireland, we'll see. Well, no, Ireland, the rest of the world is clamoring for Irish products. And so shortages could get even tougher for us Americans, because the EU and Far East, they want get their hands on those products as well. So won't be easy for us.
The Jeff Adams says, beer, you're blocked and reported. So consider yourself warned there, John, that if you're not an Irish whiskey flag flyer, beer drinkers are clearly not welcome in Jeff's house. As you work to help brands navigate the complex systems across the US and create that back office system for them and that support service, and those coming from Ireland, it sounds like your advice to consumers and to those of us who enjoy whiskey, if we want to have a whiskey that comes from one of these brands in the state we live in, it sounds like we need to talk to our local retailers. Is that the way us as consumers can best both support the brand and get it locally?
Yes, absolutely. Asking and also getting in touch with the supplier. If it's an importer that's bringing it in and the brand is available in a couple of states, being able to talk to a retailer who might then turn to their distributor and say, hey, why don't you get your hands on this product? I've got demand. I've got people asking me for it. The distributor will turn around and they will contact the supplier. The thing about the American system is, in many cases, the supply structure is such that there will typically be one importer that is appointed the brand agent to bring it in, and then they'll sell to distributors. So you can go through the chain. But yeah, the more people ask, you're right, Barry, the retailer who will then pass the message on, but also take a look. Sometimes they may not realize that as things are changing now, there are more wholesalers that are specializing in craft products. And if they hear about retailers asking, they might have to bring in a couple of cases. They can contact the supplier and say, hey, can I represent this brand? And so, but while that's happening, let's keep an eye on the direct-to-consumer models, because that could change at a faster rate that I mentioned before. And so it'll be a multi-prong approach that'll accomplish the end goal in time, I think.
One of the things that would be very helpful for us as whiskey consumers, and we have run into the absence of this thing many times, is that many Irish whiskey brands don't have the information available as to where their product has ended up. Or if they do, it's difficult to find or to collate or to make available. And some brands do it very, very well, where if somebody in California sees writer's tears arriving, their first and maybe they post something on social media, and then somebody in Kansas wants to get writer's tears. They might Google writer's tears, find the writer's tears website, and then they'll want to know, relative to where they are, is it available in their state? And if not, who do they contact? That last piece is often missing. Yeah. And I think it's a gap that I think is hurting some of the brands that, while I know it can be a challenge to get all that information, be it certainly at the account level, it can be tough, and accounts change all the time. But certainly distributor information is well known by the brands, and I'd love to see more of them shared on the websites.
Yeah, and I think what I was mentioning before, Barry, you're starting to see a lot more of these, what I call third-party marketing platforms. I mentioned you have Drizzly is the big one because they're scraping inventory. But these other ones like Reserve Bar, Thirsty, there's Speakeasy, and there are more coming because of of what people see as the trends going forward. A lot of them are specializing on new and unique craft. And so they're building distribution networks utilizing the 3-tier system, small wholesalers that say, yeah, I want to participate in helping these brands funnel through the system. So they may buy in a just-in-time mode, get it into their state, and get it into a retailer who will then deliver it to the consumer's home. So that is happening as we speak in a much bigger way today than 12 months ago, much bigger.
Sure.
And so I think great. Your audience will find more options very, very quickly at a much faster rate.
Well, it's no easy system to navigate. It's no easy system, I'm sure, for you and your team to be working with every day. And I'm sure the brands are delighted that they can make one phone call and you'll all figure it out for a very reasonable fee, no doubt. And everyone's a winner along the way.
Yeah. Well, we and for your audience member that mentioned about not drinking whiskey, I actually do still. Of course, I have my Irish American here. It's not that I don't drink whiskey at all. We also enjoy Irish beers and stouts. So. And as I said,
everyone's welcome here. Everyone's welcome.
That's right. Yeah.
There were many whiskey distillery owners and employees on tonight. Many were tagged as well. For those who didn't watch it live, they might watch back over the next few days to catch up. I see lots of our audience tagging distillery operators that they know. So lots of information here for them. If they want more information, would the best thing be to reach out to you all through your website?
Yes, they can go right to mhwltd.com. As I said, we have a lot of folks, 100 plus. My daughter, Christine, actually runs client development. As a matter of fact, she's heading to Ireland in 2 weeks for a 2-week. She'll be visiting with Sean and I think maybe 7 or 8 other distilleries, some of our existing clients. So yeah, we there's a whole group of people that are standing ready and able to help any of the members of your audience. And if we can't do it ourselves, we'll certainly point you in the direction of where you can get some support and help. And as I said, Board Bia, I'd be hard pressed to find any trade organization as active as those folks. They're terrific, and we have again a pretty big team at MHW on standby to help. Our team, our CEO, Gabe Barkley, who comes out of the direct-to-consumer world for wine. I know he's anxious to see more regulatory changes that benefit spirits come along, as we've talked about today. So a lot of tailwinds, I think, for all of us.
Fingers crossed. And this has been very helpful and very informative and very entertaining. And it's a fascinating topic and something we could probably go into at length for days on end. And maybe it's something maybe there are other angles, other questions that we could answer again at a future time, if you'd be kind enough to give us more of your time in the future. But this has been really an eye-opener. And I know a lot of people who didn't understand any of the system behind the scenes of how it worked at a state and federal level. You've given them a lot to think about and a lot to consider.
Well, I hope the audience remembers the American consumer wants your products. There's no question about that. And so stay focused on America. It is the key market. And I also I know a friend of yours, Bridget McCabe, who helped set this up. She's terrific. She's a big part of MHW's marketing process, I'll tell you that. And she is so well-versed on Irish products.
Bridget's great.
So, yeah, another great resource for your audience. But thank you very much for the invitation, Barry. And again,
thank you, John,
for everything you do across.
And thank you very much. And we're looking forward to perhaps hearing from you again in the future. And
Sure.
This has been amazing. And so thank you for your kindness and your time. And again, thank you for a very generous donation to our fundraising for cancer research. And hopefully we'll get to have a drink in person, whether it's a beer or a whiskey. I don't really care, as long as we get to have a drink together.
We'll do that, Barry. But better yet, why don't we make you the next MHW celebrity brand? I think with your reach, I think we could get you going pretty fast, and you'll sell that to Diageo in another year or two.
Me and Kendall Jenner in a room, is it? We'll talk about. Yeah, all right. Let's make it happen.
Okay, we'll do that. Thanks again very much.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. All the best. Good night.
Good night.
Cheers. Great insights and great information. And Bridget, I see you there in the comments as well. Thanks a million for connecting us. Bridget, I've known Bridget for years, since Columbus, and she reached out to me probably about 3 hours after starting work at MHW and said, we need to talk to you. We're doing all this work in the whiskey world and with Irish whiskies, and you're doing all your work. And she said, you have to talk to John. He's got an amazing insight and knowledge of the history and the workings of the systems. And so we got a call together and we all had a chat and we had a great old time. And we said, yes, of course, we have to get a lock-in going. And so we did. So Bridget, thank you. And I hope you enjoyed your 10-year-old single malt and your bag of peanuts, as you said you were going to eat tonight. So hope you enjoyed them. Thanks for connecting us all. That was a great chat, wasn't it? So there we have it. It's official. John is going to, and Bridget are going to create a celebrity brand between me and Kendall Jenner, and we're going to knock it out of the park. Simple as that. Mrs. Stories and Sips has her headphones on. She doesn't hear me over there. So that's going to happen. Steve says, why not a beer and a whiskey? Yeah, it's true. We can have beers and whiskeys and everything in between. Why not? Tyler says, this was very informative tonight. Now I know why some of the Irish whiskies I see online that you would like to purchase but can't or can get it shipped to you. Yeah, it is a minefield of legislation at a state and federal level. And then you're dealing with distributors, you're dealing with retailers. I think I see from some of the comments, a lot of you saying, it doesn't always work for you and it's not the greatest system. Yeah, look, it's a legacy system that it seems like it's evolving. When you hear things like Kentucky, quite a slow moving state, I would imagine, and maybe a conservative state, enacting fairly progressive alcohol rules around shipping. That's a good sign, isn't it? So hopefully we'll see more along those lines coming for direct to consumer as well, which would be huge. If the wine world can do it, it's only a matter of time before we can prove that the spirits world can do it as well. Cole wants to know, did I live in Dublin in Ohio? No, but I'll tell you a funny story about Dublin. It is the home of a very famous Irish festival, as you might well know, the Dublin Irish Festival. And I was the voice of the Dublin Irish Festival for 3 years, where I would record all their TV and radio commercials, because back in about 2008, 2009, I was living in Ohio, and somebody on Twitter asked, is there anybody in Ohio with an Irish accent? And I got tagged a bunch of times. And so I had to go to this recording studio and record 10 or 15 and 30-second commercials for radio and TV using their scripts. Now, these scripts were, I'm sorry to say as an Irishman, these were not how we would speak in Ireland, but it's certainly how the Americans, how you all think we speak and like to hear us speak. So that's a kind of shamrocks and kind of leprechauns kind of an approach. Anyway, I did this for 3 years. And two funny things happened. One, I remember there was a local hotel. I think it was the new Holiday Inn, opened up in Dublin, Ohio, and they had heard the TV and radio commercials, and they asked the Dublin Irish Festival who did them, and they got hold of me and they asked me to go and record. They called me up and said, "Hey, we have a project for you with your Irish accent. Can you come out to the hotel and talk to us?" So I went out to the Holiday Inn in Dublin, and they were just about to open. And they said, look, we have a very specific need for an Irish accent. I said, okay, no problem. Is it TV commercials, radio commercials? What is it that you want? And they said, no, we'd like you to record the wake-up call for the hotel. So I had to read out this script talking about how many miles Dublin, Ohio was from Dublin, Ireland, and how it's probably raining in Ireland, but if you look out your window in Ohio, it's probably not. So anyway, that was my one funny outcome of having done this Dublin Irish Festival voiceover. But the second thing was, I think the fourth year, I was waiting for my call to go into the studios and do the recording. No call came. It's getting closer to the festival. Next thing I see, new commercials came out. I wasn't in them. And there was a very different accent. So I reached out to it was a marketing agency that was in between me and the festival. And I asked them, hey, what's the story with the commercials? Will you be needing me this year? And they were very kind of slow to explain, or a little bit embarrassed perhaps to explain the reasoning why they wouldn't be using me this year. And they said, well, actually, the folks at the festival were a little concerned. They didn't think that your accent was authentic enough. So we've gone ahead and used a voice actor from Ohio who puts on a great Irish accent, and we're going to be using him going forward. I hung up the phone. So I was ditched for an American version of Barry, who has been doing it ever since. Stacey remembers the commercials. You can request them. Yeah, they're probably on their YouTube channel. If you go all the way back, you can look at the Dublin Irish Festival, and there's a few where there's like Irish dancers in the aisles of supermarkets, and they're like, it's me. I'm doing the voiceover for it anyway. You'll find them on the Dublin Irish Festival. If you go back 8 years or 9 years, I'm sure you'll find them. But yeah, so but the good thing that came out of that work with the Holiday Inn was that by recording this wake-up call, I now get to get some comfort and some reward from knowing that every morning hundreds and hundreds of women wake up to my voice. So there's always a bonus, you know. It's as simple as that. That should be the only way it happens. Dermot wants to know, did I go full cork on the commercials? No, I think many of you will know my accent's not full cork at the moment. It's tapered and tailored to the audience that needs to maybe understand it. Because if I went full Cork, like, you wouldn't understand the word I'm saying, and I'd be talking like this, and you'd be wondering what lines I'm saying, what words I'm saying, and you wouldn't hear me. So I kind of pull back on the Cork accent sometimes. I think it's helpful. No one's hired me to sing yet. No, people have paid me not to sing. That's a fact. No one has hired me to sing. Martin wants to know if I over-diddled the diddly eye. I probably did. I probably did a bit of the diddly eye. Playing it up. Well, folks, what a great night. A double whammy, a virtual tour of Ireland's only island-based Irish whiskey distillery on Ireland's largest island, the Achill Island. Although, as one person corrected me on Twitter today, sure, isn't all Irish whiskey made on an island? Fair point. But this is the only island separate from the island of Ireland where Irish whiskey is made currently. It's not the only one where it'll ever be made. There are other distilleries popping up on islands. For example, is it Beara Distillery? No, which one is it? Cape Clear Distillery, a Cape Clear Island. They have a gin distillery. They're going to be distilling whiskey. I think we'll see a few more pop up as well. There are lots of Irish Americans in Columbus. That's true. And Co's relatives are from Cork, and I'm from Cork. How about that? So yeah. So that was great. Yeah, I thought the virtual tour was amazing and great to hear from Sean. And we got a little bit of an exclusive, folks, didn't we? The 19-year-old single malt, which I can give you a clue, comes from Bushmills. 19 years of age, aged in rum casks, triple distilled single malt. Can really only come from Bushmills, can't it? If it's a triple distilled 19-year-old whiskey, single malt. So that's very exciting. I have been slow to embrace rum cask finishes in the past, but I have started, thanks to the kind generosity of some folks. Steve and Dave and Padraig have sent me some samples. I'm exploring them and getting to know them. And a full 19-year maturation in a rum cask, now that's got to be something special. Those tropical fruits have to be ridiculous. So I can't wait to see that arrive. And, is $280 expensive to pay for a whiskey? Of course, it's madness, but it's not even half of what you might pay for a similar priced a single pot still, single cask of that kind of nature in Ireland. So it certainly tracks with what we're seeing for prices. So I'll be picking up a bottle of that, and I think a lot of people in Ireland will be interested to see that as well arriving. So Sinead, that is the end of our lock-in tonight. This is the end of the lock-ins for a while, folks. We're taking a break. We have had a 15-month run, and we've had an amazing run. And the lock-in was designed not to keep you all at home, but to keep you entertained while at home. So it was never to be a permanent addition to the lineup of the things we do. So over the next few weeks and months, I've got some travel, of course, coming up. I've got training for our charity fundraiser, our the Pelotonia bike ride. There is proposed travel that we're trying to get organised for Ireland, which might last for a few months, all going to plan. So the lock-ins are going to take a step back, but the group is going to continue. And there are other events that we have organised both in person that we've started to talk about. For example, we're going to be doing a small little gathering. It'll be very small because of the number of people that live there. Utah, next week, we're going to have a little gathering. We're talking about Northern California. We're talking about California, San Francisco. We're going to try and do something in Southern California. We're going to try and do something in Minneapolis. We're going to try and do something in New Jersey or New York. So all of these things are on the cards, but we can't do them all. I can't do all of those and lock-ins and try and pay the bills as well. So we're going to balance things out. But I think this has been a fantastic 15-month run. Personally, I'm biased, but I have had the time of my life getting to know all of you and all of our guests at the same time. It's been absolutely incredible. So we will have more live streams and we'll have more guests in various ways, but the lock-in will take a step back for a little while. As simple as that. Jeff Adams wants to know what days I'll be in the Columbus area. I will be there from August 5th to the 12th. August 5th to the 12th. California is now open. Co is in Sherman Oaks. I'm in San Diego. And the world is opening. And, I had the chance this afternoon. A great example of how the world is opening. In our Facebook community, somebody posted that they were in the Dubliner bar in San Diego. And they just said, no sighting of Barry Chandler. And I saw that post. 2 minutes after it was posted, I replied and said, are you still at the bar? They said, we are. And 2 minutes later, I was standing at the bar, shaking their hands, chatting about whiskey. And that's what I want to do more of. I'd rather see more people that I've got to know, or maybe I know their names and their social media handles, but haven't seen their faces. That's probably far more valuable to all of us. I think we need some of that contact as well. So that was something that happened today. So maybe we'll do more of that. We will do more of that. Alan Cullen says, well done. Hopefully a meet up when you're back home. I'd love it. Alan would be brilliant. I'd love to meet up with some folks in Ireland and just talk pure shite. Utter, pure and utter shite, which would be great because we're all missing the shite talk. Cole says, I need to get a huge batch of green Tua glasses to sell again. I will not be doing that. That was a one-off, and we do lots of one-off things for our group, but they were great. I still have mine here, a few of mine here. We won't be doing more of those, but we'll do other things. There's more in the works. We were hoping to bring out another whiskey this year, but I can't really say too much about it, but all I can say is that in the past week, the stars did not align, and it is not going to be possible to do this launch of this whiskey that we were hoping to launch this year due to some factors out of our control in Ireland, COVID related, I think. So we will keep working on growing Irish whiskey in America, and we've got a fantastic community. The Stories and Sips community, the Irish Whiskey Fans of America community is unbelievable. I've got more fundraisers planned, we've got some great bottles offered up from Paddy Irish Whiskey, so pot still Paddy Irish Whiskey. We've got the first ever bottle number 1 to come from a single cask from Ecklandville Distillery. The bottle number 1 is going to be available to us to auction off or to use as a fundraising tool. We've got a very exclusive release from Clonakilty Distillery is going to be made available. And so there's going to be lots of fun ways that we get to hang out, enjoy whiskey together virtually, and more importantly, in person over the next few months. More importantly. Bridget says, thank you for your heart, passion for Irish whiskey. Whenever you do launch, I'll be here. Well, Bridget, you need to start flying the flag. So for this, we'll do a launch with you all. We'll create a whiskey with MHW, and we have our community, and you have all the back office, and we have all of our distillery contacts. So let's maybe we need to create a permanent whiskey, a group whiskey, a whiskey that's available all the time. So maybe I'll text you. We'll figure it out. Lisa says, hope to make it to an in-person meetup sooner than later. Thank you for all of this. I hope to see you too, Lisa. Loveliest cult you've ever been part of. Somebody called it a cult in the group, in our Facebook group last week, and I said, it's only a cult if everybody drinks the same drink. Oh, yeah, it's cult. Martin says, Barry, you've been savage for the head whenever I've tuned in. Look, there's the best Irish saying you've ever heard. You've been savage for the head whenever I've tuned in this last while, keep being the Irish whiskey spirit animal. Well, Martin, you and I did a great tasting. I'll tell you a quick story about Martin. Martin was the Tullamore Dew brand ambassador in Ohio, and I met Martin and got introduced to Martin, and I was just getting into Irish whiskey tastings. This is going back now probably 3 years, isn't it, Martin? And I was just getting into the tastings, and I was raising money for Pelotonia, and Martin offered to offer up some Tullamore Dew whiskies, and we would do a tasting with them. So we did it in a local bar, and I remember Martin was there with me, and he talked through the Tullamore whiskies, and I think I had a couple of Jameson whiskies maybe, or a Black Barrel or something perhaps, I can't remember, but I remember there were some questions from the audience about distillation and how the whiskey is distilled. And at the time I hadn't a notion about how whiskey was distilled. Like, I couldn't tell you, did whiskey come out of clouds or what? Where did it come from? I couldn't tell you. But Martin started into answering this question about column distillation, about pot still distillation, about ratios of blends, about ABVs that come out of a column versus out of a pot. And I was blown away. And I always think about that there's people like Martin who have this incredible knowledge and are incredible ambassadors for Irish whiskey that are out there flying the flag for Irish whiskey all the time. And Martin is one of those. And Martin is the co-founder of BUA Irish Whiskey. And I'll be tasting a heap of that when I go back to Ohio for Pelotonia. And we'll hopefully do an after party at Burns Pub. And we'll drink a bit of BUA up there. But Martin's a great contact and a great person, a great lad for the Irish whiskey, and a great man for the whiskey. John says, such a great stretch of lock-ins. So thankful for these. Seems time to start sharing pours. It does. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and comb through all of the lock-ins that we did. And I have this idea of assembling a line from every song that everybody sang and just make this montage of all the amazing singers who didn't expect to be singers. Like, we had Brian Nation, former master distiller at Middleton Distillery, No sooner did I ask him for a song, he was jumping out of his seat trying to sing it. But we had great singers and great entertainers over the last 15 months as well. So I'm going to put together a little montage of those. And I want to add up over the 15 months how many guests we had, how many whiskeys we drank, how many hours we broadcast for, how many comments, how many likes, how many views we had. I think the numbers are going to be wild. So if there's one good thing to come out of this pandemic, it's that we created an unbelievable community. We met periodically, mostly on a Friday night, and we launched a whiskey. We launched whiskey glasses together, and we had a lot of fun. So that is a good thing to come out of this, conscious of all the terrible things that came out as well. Maureen says we should call it the ledge bag song. We should. So we're almost at 3 hours, and I'm starved, and I'm thankful for all of you. Thanks for all your support. We're not going away. We're just saying, you know what? It's time to evolve. The lock-in, the world isn't locked in anymore for the most part. So this has to evolve, and we can't just keep doing this for the sake of doing it. We must find new ways to get together and to promote Irish whiskey. As simple as that. What else is there to say? Nothing. Stories and Sips will, of course, continue. We're going to keep doing Ohio events. We're going to keep doing in-person events. We're going to, we've got a news section on Stories and Sips that's evolving. I think I'm going to start thinking about some whiskey reviews and doing some writing around whiskey as well. So it's just going to evolve. This is just, we used to have a YouTube podcast. Then we had a Apple, iTunes, and Spotify podcast. Then it evolved into the Lock-In. We've done the Waterford Whiskey podcast. So there's lots evolving. And so I don't want us to stay just to be stale and to think that it has to be just every Friday night for the sake of it. This started for a very specific reason. And I'm very conscious that very specific reason is gone now for the most part, touch wood. So we're not all locked down. The pubs aren't all closed anymore. They're opening up. We must open up with them. So we'll evolve, we'll grow. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm only getting started. Trust me. I'm only getting started. Jeff wants to know, will I go back to doing the podcast? Perhaps. We'll see. Right now I'm actually most interested in spending my time with people, traveling, getting out on the road again, away from a computer. We have a fantastic community. It'd be no harm if I we just take a little step back for a little bit. Right now I'm focused on the fundraisers from now until November, fundraising events, in-person events, and then we'll see. Lots to do. Ed said the opportunity to get to know people outside of your own area has been amazing. Yeah, it really has. And on that topic, Jeff, of podcasts, I want to give a hat tip to all of the great creators, content creators out there in the world of Irish whiskey who are diligently creating content. Whiskey Chats podcast, Pot Stilled Radio, Irish Whiskey Magazine, weekly interviews that Irish Whiskey Magazine does on his words on whiskey, and so there are great flag flyers and standard bearers for content producing. I've always been on the side of I want our things to be about connecting people, so community driven. I don't just want, and this is not in any way disparaging the great work that others are doing in creating content, but what actually gets me most excited is when I get to talk to people either here or in person and have a back and forth, not just sending you information or giving you information, but rather the back and forth, the chat, the crack, the banter. That's what's most interesting to me. So that's why I've always preferred the events to just content creation, where we just interview people alone. I think there's lots of things we could do. Good idea, Jeff. Traveling podcast with interviews in pubs. See, I want to be different. I want to be doing something different. Maybe we do live podcasts where we bring people together and we all chat about whiskey, 3 or 4 of us in a room, and we record that. So keep sending your ideas. I'll take them all in. So that's it. Should we sing us out? Should we have a song? The Owl Triangle has been our, whether you like it or hate it, my neighbors hate it. They're all walking up the street now. They know it's about 7 o'clock. They know it's coming. The Owl Triangle should send us out. But maybe we'll do a few more verses. Let me pull up. There's I gathered a few there today, so that it's not just one verse. We gotta get the right lyrics. All right, there's one more verse we typically don't do. I'll throw that in here. So what was I drinking tonight? I was drinking the Irish American blend, the classic blend here. which I thought was a lovely floral, flavorful, creamy blend. Wheat. Again, I'm very surprised about the wheat. How didn't I know that? Irish American 10-year-old single malt was our second whiskey. And then our third whiskey was 2 stacks, cask strength, 65% ABV. It has singed the hairs on my chest already, so I can't be drinking too much of that. So let me oil the pipes with a bit of it, though. And then we will let you go on with your nights. Here we go. I should wave a glass. A hungry feeling came o'er me stealing, and the mice were squealing in my prison cell, and the old triangle went jingle, jangle, all along the banks of the Royal Canal. To begin the morning, the screw was bawling, "Get up, you bowsy, and clean up your cell." And that old triangle went jingle, jangle, all along the banks of the Royal Canal. On a fine spring evening, the lag lay dreaming, and the seagulls squealing high above the wall, and the old triangle went jingle, jangle, all along the banks of the Royal Canal. Oh, the day was dying, and the wind was sighing, as I lay there crying in my prison cell. And the old triangle went jingle, jangle, all along the banks of the Royal Canal. I wish to Jesus they'd raise my wages, from 13 shillings up to £2.10. And that old triangle went jingle, jangle, all along the banks of the Royal Canal. Last verse. Up in the female prison, there are 75 women. 'Tis among those women I wish I did dwell. And the old triangle went jingle, bloody jangle, all along the banks of the Royal Canal. And that old triangle went jingle, jangle, all along the banks of the Royal Canal. All along the banks of the Canal. Sláinte. Sláinte va. Thanks, everybody. And everyone's saying thanks to Mrs. Stories and Sips. Any cameo interest on the last lock-in? No cameo interest? No. It won't happen, folks. You gotta come to an in-person tasting. She'll always be at those. As simple as that. All right, folks. Thanks a million for all your support. We're not going away. Just the lock-in is taking a break, and we'll do more great things together. So stay tuned, and maybe plan some in-person things for your Friday nights. That's what I'll be doing for us and for you as well. So stay tuned. Keep drinking Irish whiskey. Throw away that whole scotch and that bourbon. Good night. Sláinte, everybody.